Welcome to Midnight Materia. You are listening to the very first entry in our archives. As we begin this journey into the live stream together, I ask that you subscribe and help us build this community from the ground up. It helps the channel more than you know. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Sit right back and gaze into the live stream and view just one of many of our alternate timelines. Today we ask the question, what if? What if Sephiroth never went mad? We often believe that monsters are always waiting just beneath the skin, just looking for an excuse to claw their way out. But let me tell you, that is rarely the truth. The descent into darkness is not a fall. It is a slide. It is a quiet, suffocating realization that the world you stand on is made of nothing but glass, and you have just looked down to see the cracks spreading beneath your boots. We begin our story in the silence. It was a silence so profound that it seemed to have a physical weight, pressing against the eardrums, heavy and thick like the humid air before a summer storm. But we are not outside. We are deep beneath the earth, in the forgotten basement of a mansion that smells of dust, mildew, and the copper tang of old experiments. The Shinra Manor in Nibelheim. To the rest of the world, to the troopers stationed outside, to the villagers sleeping in their beds under the shadow of the reactor. This was just another mission. But inside this room, history was holding its breath. Sephiroth sat on the cold stone floor. He was not the towering figure of terror that history remembers. In this moment, under the flickering hum of a dying fluorescent light, he looked small. His silver hair, usually a pristine curtain of silk, hung lank and disordered over his face, shielding his eyes from the harsh reality scattered around him. The floor was a sea of paper, files, journals, reports scrawled in the erratic, frantic handwriting of men long dead or long lost to their own madness. Gast, Hojo. The names seemed to float off the pages, mocking him. For 3 days, he had not slept. For 3 days, the first-class soldier, the hero of the Wutai War, the idol of millions, had done nothing but read. And with every page he turned, a piece of his soul had quietly eroded away. He reached out, his hand trembling in a way that his sword hand never had, and picked up a crumpled sheet of yellowing paper. It was a report on the biological compatibility of the ancients. The handwriting was jagged, clinical, cold. It spoke of a creature found in the geological stratum, a creature they called Jenova. Sephiroth whispered the name, and the sound of it died in the damp air. Jenova, his mother. That was what he had been told. That was the lie he had worn like armor his entire life. He had believed his mother was a woman named Jenova, a human, perhaps a noble who had died giving him life. He had built an entire identity around that tragedy. It made him feel special. It made him feel connected. But the paper in his hand did not speak of a woman. It spoke of a calamity. It spoke of cells. It spoke of a project designed to manufacture a god or a monster. He dropped the paper. It fluttered to the ground, landing atop a diagram of a fetus submerged in Mako energy. The realization did not bring anger. Not yet. In the timeline you know, the anger came swiftly. It was a fire that consumed his logic, turning his confusion into a weapon against humanity. But here, in the quiet, Sephiroth felt only a crushing, paralyzing horror. He looked at his hands. The gloved leather creaked softly. Underneath that leather, underneath the skin. What was he? Was he human? Or was he just a collection of stolen cells mimicking the shape of a man? He felt a wave of nausea roll through him. It was a visceral rejection of his own existence. If he was not human, then everything he had ever felt, every moment of pride, every moment of camaraderie, every quiet moment of peace, was a simulation, a lie. He was not a hero. He was property. He was a product line. The hum of the Mako reactor in the mountains seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, calling to him. Usually, that sound was comforting. It was the sound of power. Now, it sounded like a scream. "Who am I?" he asked the empty room. His voice was a rasp. It cracked, devoid of the imperious command he was known for. "Who am I?" The silence of the basement gave him no answer. Only the flickering light buzzed in response. In the corner of the room, the Masamune rested against a rusted bookshelf. The legendary blade. 7 feet of folded steel that had carved through armies. He looked at it, and for the first time in his life, he felt afraid of it. He didn't want to touch it. He feared that if he picked it up, he wouldn't know when to stop swinging. The violence that was bred into him, the instinct to kill, was that him? Or was that the monster they had baked into his blood? He pulled his knees to his chest. The great General Sephiroth, curling inward like a frightened child. Above him, on the ground floor of the manor, footsteps echoed. They were heavy, booted steps, pacing, anxious. Sephiroth heard them, but he couldn't bring himself to move. He couldn't put the mask back on. The mask of the general was broken, shattered on the floor alongside the reports. The footsteps stopped at the top of the spiral staircase. Then, they began to descend. Clank, clank, clank. The sound of standard-issue soldier boots hitting metal stairs. Sephiroth. The voice was young, hopeful, anxious. It was Zack. Sephiroth closed his eyes. He didn't want Zack to see him. Not like this. Zack looked at him with eyes full of stars. To Zack, Sephiroth was the pinnacle, the goal, the proof that greatness was possible. If Zack saw this, if he saw the emptiness in Sephiroth's eyes, it would destroy him. "Go away, Zack," Sephiroth whispered. But his voice was too weak to carry up the stairs. The footsteps reached the bottom. Zack Fair, puppy dog energy dampened by worry, rounded the corner into the laboratory. He stopped dead. The sight before him was incomprehensible. The room was a disaster zone of scattered documents. And there, in the center of the storm, sat the strongest man in the world, looking as though he had been hollowed out. "Sephiroth," Zack said again, softer this time. He took a tentative step forward. "Sir, you've been down here it's been 3 days. The troopers are getting twitchy. Tifa's dad is asking when we're leaving." Sephiroth didn't look up. He couldn't. "Leave, Zack. Take the troopers. Take the infantrymen. Return to Midgar." "Without you?" Zack let out a nervous, incredulous laugh. "Yeah, right. Like I'm gonna tell Director Lazard I just left the first-class general in a haunted basement. Come on, what are you reading?" Zack moved to pick up one of the papers. "Don't touch it!" The command ripped out of Sephiroth's throat with a ferocity that made Zack flinch. Sephiroth's head snapped up. His cat-like pupils were blown wide, trembling. There was no malice in his face, only a desperate, frantic need to protect his friend from the contagion of the truth. "Don't touch them," Sephiroth said, his voice shaking, dropping back down to a whisper. "It's poison, Zack. It's all poison." Zack slowly raised his hands, palms open. He had faced dragons, mechs, and entire battalions. But he had never been as terrified as he was right now, looking at the fragility of his mentor. He carefully kicked a pile of papers aside and sat down on the floor, a few feet away from Sephiroth. "Okay," Zack said gently. "Okay, I won't touch them. But you gotta talk to me, man. You're scaring me. What did you find?" Sephiroth stared at the stone floor between them. He traced a crack in the tile with his eyes. "I found my origins," Sephiroth murmured. I was not born, Zack. I was manufactured, like a weapon, like a materia." Zack frowned, tilting his head. "What does that mean? Manufactured?" "Jenova," Sephiroth breathed. "She wasn't a woman. She was something else, something from the stars. And Hojo, he used her cells. He put them in me. I am." He choked on the words. The tears, hot and unfamiliar, pricked at the corners of his eyes. "I am a monster, Zack. I am the enemy of this planet." The silence returned. It stretched for 10 seconds. 20. Sephiroth waited for Zack to recoil. He waited for the sound of the Buster sword being drawn. He waited for the condemnation that he felt he deserved. But it didn't come. Instead, he heard the rustle of fabric. Zack shifted his weight. "So?" Zack asked. Sephiroth blinked. He looked up, bewildered. "So? Did you not hear me? I am a monster." "I heard you," Zack said, his voice firm. "You said some scientist put some weird cells in you when you were a baby. Okay, that sounds like typical Shinra creepy science stuff, but Sephiroth, look at me." Sephiroth held his gaze. "You've saved my life," Zack said, pointing a finger at his own chest. "Twice. You stopped the war in Wutai. You treat your men with respect. You trained me. You trained... Well, you mostly ignored Cloud, but you didn't squash him." A faint ghost of a memory surfaced the spiky-headed infantryman who followed them around like a lost duckling. Cloud. "That wasn't me," Sephiroth argued weakly. "That was the programming. That was the persona they built." "Bullshit," Zack snapped. The curse word cracked through the gloomy atmosphere like a whip. "Programming doesn't make you stay up late teaching me how to counter a behemoth's charge. Programming doesn't make you sad. Programming is a machine, Sephiroth. Machines don't cry." Sephiroth reached up and touched his face. His cheek was wet. He hadn't realized he was crying. "You're human," Zack said, leaning forward, his blue eyes burning with an intensity that rivaled the Mako lamps. "I don't care what your biology is. I don't care if your mom was an alien or a chocobo. You are who you choose to be. And right now, you're just a guy having a really, really bad week." Sephiroth looked at the younger man. He saw the sincerity there. It was a lifeline, a single thin thread of spiderweb hanging over an abyss. "I don't know if I can be that man anymore," Sephiroth confessed. "I feel the connection to her, to Jenova. She's calling to me, Zack. It's like a noise in the back of my skull. She wants me to burn it all." "Then we don't listen," Zack said simply. He stood up and brushed the dust off his pants. He extended a hand down to Sephiroth. "We?" Sephiroth looked at the gloved hand. "Yeah, we," Zack grinned, though it was a tight, worried grin. "I'm not letting you go through a midlife crisis alone. You hear a voice? Fine, I'll just talk louder. I can be pretty loud, you know. Ask Angeal. He used to say I could talk the ears off a goblin." Sephiroth looked at the hand. He looked at the piles of paper, the manifesto of his doom. He could stay here. He could let the voice of the calamitous mother take over. It would be so easy to just let go, to become the destroyer. But Zack was there, solid, real, annoyingly optimistic. Sephiroth took a breath. It shuddered in his chest. He made a choice. He reached up and grasped Zack's forearm. The grip was strong, desperate. Zack hauled him to his feet. Sephiroth swayed, lightheaded from days of fasting, but he stood. "We have to burn them," Sephiroth said, looking at the papers. "The mansion?" Zack asked, eyeing the walls nervously. "No," Sephiroth said. "The lies, the reports, all of it." He raised a hand. A small sphere of fire magic coalesced in his palm. It wasn't the raging inferno of a Firaga meant for war. It was a small, controlled flame. He cast it onto the pile of Hojo's journals. The dry paper caught instantly. The flames licked up, curling the edges of the diagrams, turning the words Jenova Project into ash. The orange light danced across Sephiroth's pale face, chasing away the shadows. "We aren't going to the reactor," Sephiroth stated, his voice gaining a fraction of its old steel. "I cannot go there. If I see her, I do not know if I can resist." "Then we don't go," Zack agreed, watching the fire. "We pack up. We grab the troopers. We go back to Midgar." "Not as soldiers," Sephiroth corrected. He watched the fire consume the truth of his birth. "I am not going back to be their general, Zack. I am going back to find the rest of the answers. And if Hojo lied to me..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Right," Zack swallowed. "Investigation mode. I like it. Stealthy. We'll be like ninjas. Well, you'll be a ninja. I'll be a very quiet, large person." Sephiroth looked at his friend. For the first time in 3 days, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. It wasn't a smile. Not quite. But it was human. "Let's go," Sephiroth said, turning his back on the burning pile. He grabbed the Masamune. It still felt heavy, but now it felt like a tool, not a master. "Get the infantryman. What was his name?" "Cloud." "Yeah," Zack beamed, opening the heavy iron door to the stairs. "Cloud. He's gonna be psyched you remembered his name." "He is from this village," Sephiroth noted as they began the ascent, leaving the darkness of the basement behind. "He has family here. It is good we are leaving. This place, Nibelheim, it deserves peace." They walked up the spiral stairs, the sound of their boots distinct and rhythmic. In the original history, the history that was supposed to happen, Sephiroth walked out of that basement and set the world on fire. He stood in the flames and smiled at the destruction. But in this history, the basement was left to burn alone. The flames consumed the past, turning the secrets of Shinra into smoke that drifted up through the floorboards, vanishing into the cold night air. Sephiroth emerged from the mansion. The night air hit his face. It was crisp, real. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with oxygen instead of despair. He looked up at the sky. The stars were there, distant, cold, but silent. He wasn't the chosen one. He wasn't a god. He was just a man who'd been lied to. And as he walked toward the inn to rally his men, Sephiroth realized that being a man was terrifying. But it was also, strangely, liberating. The nightmare had been averted, but the long night was just beginning. We often speak of wings as symbols of freedom. We look at the birds circling the high currents of the air, and we project our own desires onto them, the desire to escape, to rise above the grime and gravity of our lives. We say, "I wish I could fly," but we forget that wings are heavy. They are muscle and bone and feathers that catch the wind, yes, but they also catch the storm. To have a wing is to be beholden to the sky. And sometimes the sky is not a place of freedom. Sometimes it is a vacuum, a cold, infinite expanse that wants to pull you apart. For Sephiroth, the weight on his shoulder was not yet physical. It was a phantom pressure, a ghost of a mutation waiting to erupt. The morning sun over Nibelheim was aggressive. It didn't gently wake the world. It assaulted it. The light bounced off the white wood of the buildings and the polished steel of the water tower, creating a glare that forced Sephiroth to squint as he stepped out of the Shinra Manor. He paused at the gate. His hand, gloved and trembling slightly, rested on the cold iron bars. Behind him, the mansion stood silent. It was no longer a mystery. It was a tomb of truths that he had chosen to leave buried. Smoke was still curling from the chimney, the last remnants of the files, the data, the proof of his monstrous heritage drifting up to join the pristine mountain air. "General?" The voice belonged to a trooper, a young man with blonde, spiky hair, his face obscured by the standard-issue infantry helmet. He was standing by the transport truck, his posture rigid, terrified of doing something wrong in front of the legend. Sephiroth looked at the boy. In another life, this boy would have been the one to drive a sword through Sephiroth's back. In another life, this boy would have been the vessel for Sephiroth's will. But here, in the bright, unforgiving light of morning, he was just a kid from the backwater. "At ease, trooper," Sephiroth said. His voice sounded hollow to his own ears, stripped of its usual resonance. The trooper, Cloud Strife, relaxed his shoulders, though he still looked starstruck. "Sir, the transport is ready. Commander Zack said we're moving out? Abandoning the mission?" Abandoning. The word stung. Sephiroth tightened his grip on the gate until the iron groaned. "The mission is complete," Sephiroth lied. He was getting better at lying. He had learned that his entire life was a fabrication, so what was one more falsehood to add to the pile? "The reactor is malfunctioning due to natural decay. There's nothing there for us. We return to Midgar for debriefing." "Yes, sir," Cloud saluted, sharp and eager. Zack emerged from the inn across the square, carrying 2 large duffel bags. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, a testament to the fact that he had spent the night watching Sephiroth, making sure the general didn't slip back into the darkness. But his smile was plastered on, bright and defiant. "All right, ladies and gentlemen," Zack called out, tossing the bags into the back of the truck. "Tour's over, no souvenirs. Let's get this show on the road before the mayor decides to give us another boring speech about the water quality." Zack moved to Sephiroth's side. He didn't say anything, but he bumped his shoulder against Sephiroth's arm, a small physical check-in. "I'm here. You're real." "You okay to ride in the back?" Zack murmured, pitched low so the troopers couldn't hear. "I can drive if you want to sit up, front." "The back is fine," Sephiroth replied. I need to not see the road for a while." They boarded the transport. It was a standard Shinra hauler canvas roof, metal benches, smelling of diesel and stale sweat. Sephiroth took the seat furthest from the tailgate, disappearing into the shadows of the canopy. Zack sat opposite him. The 2 infantrymen, Cloud and another faceless grunt, took the seats near the exit. The engine roared to life. The truck lurched forward. As they rolled out of Nibelheim, Sephiroth didn't look back. he couldn't. He knew that if he looked at the peaceful village, at the people going about their morning chores, at the girl with the long black hair watching them from her porch, he would scream. He felt like a contagion. He felt that by simply existing near them, he was endangering them. The urge to destroy was gone, replaced by a terrified urge to quarantine himself. The journey was long. The truck rattled over the uneven mountain roads, shaking Sephiroth's bones. Every bump in the road felt like a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. And in the rhythm of the road, he began to hear it again. Come to me. It wasn't a sound. It was a thought that wasn't his own. It slid into his mind like a needle sliding into a vein. Cold, invasive, my son, my beautiful puppet. Sephiroth squeezed his eyes shut. He gripped his knees. The Masamune, resting against his leg, seemed to hum in sympathy. The sword wanted blood. The cells in his body wanted reunion. Hey! Sephiroth snapped his eyes open. Zack was leaning forward, elbows on his knees, staring intently at him. The younger soldier had pulled a small, battered object from his pocket. An apple. The dumbest, simplest thing in the world. A Benora White. You gotta eat, Zack said, tossing the apple across the aisle. Sephiroth caught it instinctively. His reflexes were still perfect, even if his mind was fracturing. He looked at the fruit. It was purple, shining in the dim light of the truck. I am not hungry, Sephiroth said. Didn't ask if you were hungry, Zack countered. I said you gotta eat. Metabolism, remember? You burn Mako just by sitting there. If you crash, you're gonna get moody. And a moody Sephiroth is bad for morale. Look at Cloud over there. He's terrified you're gonna fire him. Cloud, who had been staring out the back of the truck, jumped as his name was mentioned. No, sir. I mean, just honored to be here, sir. Sephiroth looked at the trooper. He saw the bright blue eyes. Mako eyes. The same eyes he saw in the mirror. Tell me, Cloud, Sephiroth said softly. Why did you join Soldier? Cloud stiffened. He wasn't actually in Soldier yet, he was just a grunt, but he puffed out his chest. To be like you, sir. To be a hero. To prove that I'm strong. Sephiroth turned the apple over in his hand. Strength? Yes, sir. Cloud nodded enthusiastically. Everyone knows the general is the strongest. You don't fear anything. Sephiroth let out a short, dry laugh. It was a bitter sound. I fear everything, Cloud. Only a fool fears nothing. The truck hit a massive pothole, sending them all bouncing a few inches off the bench. The apple slipped from Sephiroth's hand and rolled across the metal floor. Zack reached out and stopped it with his boot. He picked it up, wiped it on his shirt, and handed it back. You're projecting, Zack said quietly to Sephiroth, his tone shifting from playful to serious. Stop scaring the kid and eat the damn apple. Sephiroth took a bite. It tasted bitter. Dumb apples always did. But the act of chewing, of swallowing, it grounded him. It was a biological necessity. It reminded him that he was a living organism, not just a vessel for an ancient calamity. Zack, Sephiroth whispered, leaning in so the wind rushing past the canvas would mask his words. I can hear her. She knows we are leaving. Zack's expression didn't waver. Let her scream. We're louder. We're going to Midgar. We're going to find the records Hojo thinks he deleted. You're not alone in this head of yours anymore, Sephiroth. You got a co-pilot. A co-pilot, Sephiroth mused. You are an arrogant puppy, Zack Fair. And you're a brooding, high-maintenance diva, Zack shot back with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. But we're a team. Partners. Sephiroth leaned his head back against the canvas wall of the truck. The vibration was still there, rattling his teeth. But the voice, the alien whisper, it receded slightly, pushed back by the sheer, stubborn humanity of the man sitting across from him. They rode in silence for hours. The mountains gave way to the rocky wastelands. The air grew warmer, thicker, tasting of smog and industrial exhaust. By nightfall, the silhouette of the city appeared on the horizon. Midgar, the city of steel, the pizza in the sky. It rose from the wasteland like a dark crown, its 8 reactors glowing with the sickly green light of Mako. To most, it looked like a fortress of progress. To Sephiroth, looking at it now through eyes that had been opened in the basement, it looked like a parasite. A massive metal tick burrowed into the skin of the planet, sucking it dry. He felt a pang of sympathy for the planet. He knew what it felt like to be used, to be harvested. "We are entering the perimeter," the driver shouted from the cab. Sephiroth sat up straight. He smoothed his hair. He adjusted his pauldrons. The mask of the general had to come back on. He couldn't let President Shinra or Hojo see the cracks. "Ready?" Zack asked, standing up as the truck slowed down. Sephiroth stood. He towered over Zack, over Cloud. He took a deep breath, inhaling the pollution of the city that had made him. "No," Sephiroth said honestly, "but I will not run." The truck stopped. The tailgate dropped with a heavy clang. They stepped out onto the concrete of the Sector 8 entrance. The lights of Midgar were blinding. The noise was deafening cars, sirens, the hum of the plate. Sephiroth looked up at the Shinra building standing in the center of the city. The headquarters, the place where he was made, the place where the man who claimed to be his father was waiting in a lab, dissecting things that should be left alone. Sephiroth's hand went to the hilt of the Masamune, not to draw it, but to steady it. "We go to my office first," Sephiroth commanded, his voice returning to its cool, authoritative register. "I need access to the restricted archives before Hojo knows we have returned." Zack nodded, falling into step beside him. And then, Sephiroth said, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the glowing windows of the science department on the 67th floor. "We go to verify the truth." Cloud scrambled to grab their bags, following them like a loyal shadow. They walked into the city. 3 soldiers, one broken, one holding him together, and one watching it all, unaware that he was witnessing the rewriting of history. The monster had not been born in Nibelheim, but the rebel was just taking his first steps. Midgar is a monument to man's arrogance. From the ground, it blocks out the sky, a steel plate that separates the wealthy from the dirt. From the air, it looks like a wound, a circular infection glowing green in the dark wasteland. But inside the tower, inside the Shinra building, it just smells like floor wax and ozone. It is a sterile hell. Sephiroth stood in the elevator. The numbers above the door climbed steadily. 50, 55, 60. He stood with his back straight, his eyes fixed on the reflective metal doors. In the reflection, he saw the perfect soldier. The black leather, the silver pauldrons, the hair that shimmered like moonlight. But behind the eyes, the storm was raging. Every floor they passed was another layer of lies. Administration, weapons development, urban planning, departments dedicated to squeezing the life out of the planet and selling it back to the people for gil. "You're grinding your teeth," Zack whispered. Zack was standing beside him, leaning casually against the handrail, though his eyes darted nervously at the security camera in the corner. "The noise," Sephiroth murmured, barely moving his lips. "Can you not hear it?" "Hear what?" Zack asked. "The elevator music? It's pretty bad, but I wouldn't say it's grind your teeth bad." "The pipes," Sephiroth corrected. "The Mako. It is moving through the walls like blood. It screams." Zack went silent. He looked at the camera again, then back at his mentor. He reached out and tapped the back of Sephiroth's hand, a quick, grounding touch. "Focus on the mission. We get the files. We find out the truth. Then we figure out how to unplug the screaming." The elevator chimed. "Floor 67, science and research." The doors slid open. The air here was colder than the rest of the building. It smelled of antiseptic and preserved biology. This was Hogos' domain. Sephiroth stepped out. The lab technicians in the hallway froze. They scrambled against the walls, clutching their clipboards, bowing their heads. They were terrified of him. Before, Sephiroth had thought this was respect. Now he realized it was the same fear one has for a wild animal that has been let off its leash. "General Sephiroth." The voice was oily, smooth. Sephiroth stopped. He didn't turn immediately. He knew that voice. It was the voice of the man who ran the Turks. Tseng walked down the corridor. He was impeccable, as always. His suit was sharp, his dark hair pulled back, a bindi on his forehead marking his Wutai heritage, or rather, the heritage he had forsaken to serve Shinra. "Tseng," Sephiroth acknowledged, turning slowly. "I was not aware the Turks were monitoring the science floor." "We monitor everything, General," Tseng said, his face a mask of professional, polite indifference. "We were surprised to see you return from Nibelheim so soon. The President was under the impression the reactor survey would take another week. The situation was less complex than anticipated." Sephiroth lied. He felt the weight of the Masamune on his back. "The reactor is stable, just old. I am here to file the preliminary report." Tseng's eyes flickered to Zack, then back to Sephiroth. He was a master of reading people, a spy trained in the arts of interrogation. Sephiroth knew he had to be perfect. One slip, one tremor in his voice, and Tseng would know that the general had gone rogue. "And you need to file this report in the sample room?" Tseng asked, raising an eyebrow. "Administration is on floor 65? "Hojo requested biological data," Sephiroth said. "I am delivering it personally." It was a gamble. Hojo always wanted data. Tseng studied him for a long moment. The silence stretched, tight as a wire. Then, the Turk nodded. "Very well," Tseng said. "Welcome back, General. If you need anything, the Turks are at your disposal." "Thank you, Tseng." Sephiroth turned and walked away. He felt Tseng's eyes boring into his back until they rounded the corner. "That was close," Zack breathed. "Tseng gives me the creeps. He knows something." "He suspects," Sephiroth corrected. "Turks always suspect. Come." They reached the terminal in the back of the lab. This was it, the access point to the mainframe. Sephiroth stripped off his glove. His hand, pale and long-fingered, hovered over the keyboard. He typed in his clearance code. Access granted. He didn't search for current projects. He went back. 20 years back. He searched for Project J. He searched for Gast. He searched for Lucretia. The screen flickered, scrolling through lines of green text. Subject, Jenova. Classification, extraterrestrial entity. Excavation site, northern crater. Status, calamity. Sephiroth read the words. They were the same as the papers in the basement, but here, in the cold light of the Shinra server, they felt final. Project S, implantation of J cells in utero. Mother, Lucretia Crescent. Father, Hojo. Sephiroth stopped breathing. The name was there, undeniable, Hojo. That, Zack leaned in, reading over his shoulder. That slime ball has your... Do not say it, Sephiroth hissed. He felt a wave of revulsion so strong he almost smashed the screen. Hojo, the man who looked at him like a lab rat. The man who had sneered at him his entire life. That was his father. And Lucretia, the woman in the flashbacks he sometimes saw. She had allowed this. General? It was a new voice. Not Zack, not Sang. Sephiroth minimized the window instantly. He turned. Standing in the doorway of the lab was Hojo himself. The scientist looked disheveled, his lab coat stained, his glasses reflecting the glare of the monitors. He was holding a beaker of glowing blue liquid. Back so soon, my boy? Hojo cackled. It was a wet, unpleasant sound. Did the reactor bore you? Or did you find something interesting in the mountains? Sephiroth looked at the man, his father, his creator, the architect of his pain. Every instinct in Sephiroth's body screamed to draw his sword, to end it, to cut the cancer out of the world, right here, right now. The killing intent spiked so hard, the room seemed to darken. Zack stepped forward, subtly positioning himself between Sephiroth and Hojo. Professor, Zack chirped, his voice loud and artificially cheerful. We were just looking for you. The general has some, questions about the Mako density at the reactor. Technical stuff. Boring stuff. Hojo sneered at Zack. I do not speak to failures, second class. I am speaking to the general. He looked at Sephiroth, his eyes gleaming with a twisted pride. Well, did you feel it, Sephiroth? Did you feel the resonance? The North is calling. Sephiroth stared at him. He forced his face into a mask of ice. I felt nothing, Sephiroth said. Only the cold. Hojo looked disappointed. He adjusted his glasses. Pity. Perhaps the dosage was too low. Or perhaps you are simply defective. No matter. We have other specimens. Other avenues. Hojo turned his back on them, dismissing the most dangerous man in the world as if he were a janitor. Get out of my lab. I have work to do. And tell President Shinra I am not to be disturbed. Sephiroth stood there. His hand was shaking. Let's go, Zack whispered, grabbing Sephiroth's arm and pulling him toward the door. We got the info. Let's go before you turn him into sushi. They walked out of the lab. Sephiroth felt numb. He had the confirmation. He was the son of a madman and a victim. He was a science experiment gone wrong. They retreated to the soldier floor, to Sephiroth's private quarters. The room was sparse. A bed, a desk, a rack for his sword. No personal items, no photos. It was the room of a weapon, not a man. Sephiroth sat on the edge of the bed. He put his head in his hands. I am going to kill him, Sephiroth said. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Yeah, Zack said, pacing the room. Yeah, he definitely deserves it, but not yet. If you kill him now, Shinra locks down the building. We never get out. And we need to get out. Where do we go? Sephiroth asked. There is nowhere on this planet that is not under their shadow. We go down, Zack said. He stopped pacing. He looked out the window, down toward the dark, smog-choked expanse of the slums below the plate. I know a girl, in the Sector 5 slums. She knows about the ancients, real history, not Hojo science crap. The flower girl? Sephiroth asked. He remembered Zack talking about her. Aerith. Yeah, Zack smiled softly. Aerith, she can help us. She can tell you what the planet really wants. Because I'm pretty sure the planet doesn't want you to be a monster. Sephiroth looked at his hands. He remembered the diagram. Project S. The ancients, Sephiroth mused. The Cetra. If I am to understand my mother, the alien, I must understand what she destroyed. I must understand the people she stole this world from. He stood up. The despair was still there, but it was hardening into resolve. He had a mission now. Not a mission from Shinra, a mission of his own. We go to the slums, Sephiroth decided. Tonight, we evade the Turks. We find this Aerith. Awesome, Zack grinned. But first, you gotta change. Change? Yeah, Zack gestured to Sephiroth's outfit. You're wearing a giant leather trench coat and silver armor. You scream, I am a Shinra general. If we're going to the slums, we need to blend in. At least a little. Sephiroth looked down at his attire. He had never worn anything else. I do not own casual wear, Sephiroth admitted. Zack laughed. It was a genuine, boisterous laugh that broke the tension in the room. Unbelievable. Okay, I have some spare clothes. They might be a little short on you, but it's better than the pauldrons. Come on, General, let's play dress up. For the first time in his life, Sephiroth took off the armor. He unbuckled the leather straps. He laid the silver pauldrons on the bed. As the weight left his shoulders, he felt lighter, exposed, but lighter. He was shedding the skin of the hero. He was becoming a fugitive. And somewhere, deep in the pipes of the building, the Mako screamed a little softer, as if it knew that someone was finally listening. Gravity is a funny thing in Midgar. Up on the plate, gravity feels like a suggestion. The steel towers reach so high they seem to challenge the sky, demanding that the laws of nature bend to the will of the electric power company. But down below, under the plate, gravity is a tyrant. The air is heavier here. It is thick with the smell of rust, unwashed bodies, and the damp, earthy scent of soil that has never seen the sun. When you descend from the light of Sector 8 to the shadow of Sector 5, you feel it in your chest. A compression, a reminder that you are now walking in the graveyard of the world above. Sephiroth adjusted the collar of the borrowed vest. It was tight across his shoulders. Zack was a large man, broad and muscular, but Sephiroth was built like a different species entirely. His limbs were longer, his frame denser. The civilian clothes, a simple sleeveless shirt and cargo pants, felt like a costume. He felt ridiculous. He felt like a wolf trying to pass itself off as a sheepdog. Stop pulling at it, Zack whispered, leading the way through the crowded market of the slums. You look fine. You look like a very intense, very tall mechanic. I look like a deserter, Sephiroth muttered, keeping his head down. He had wrapped the Masamune in a roll of canvas and strapped it to his back. It looked like a bundle of pipes or scrap metal, common enough in the slums. But the weight of it was familiar. It was the only familiar thing in this chaotic, noisy underworld. The Sector 5 slums were an assault on the senses. Neon lights flickered erratically, buzzing like angry hornets. Merchants shouted their wares, scrap metal, rat stew, bootleg potions. Children with dirty faces ran between the legs of the adults, chasing mangy dogs. Sephiroth flinched as a drunkard stumbled past him, nearly brushing his arm. In his previous life, the life that ended yesterday, he would have been flanked by guards. The crowds would have parted. Now he was just another body in the crush. "We're almost there," Zack said over his shoulder. Cloud was trailing behind them, his eyes wide, clutching the supply bags close to his chest. The boy looked terrified of the locals, his hand hovering near the standard-issue sword on his hip. "Relax, Cloud," Sephiroth commanded softly, though he didn't turn around. "Fear attracts predators. Walk with purpose." "Yes, sir," Cloud squeaked, straightening his spine. They moved away from the market, navigating the twisted maze of debris and shanties until the noise began to fade. The aggressive neon gave way to the soft, gray light of the lamps. The ground changed from metal grating to dirt. And then they saw it. The church. It was a ruin, a wooden skeleton of a building that belonged to an era before Mako, before Shinra, before the world forgot how to pray. The roof was shattered, gaping holes exposing the steel underbelly of the plate above. But despite the decay, it stood. It possessed a quiet dignity that the shinier buildings upstairs lacked. Zack stopped at the heavy wooden doors. He turned to Sephiroth, his expression serious. "She's in here," Zack said. "Aerith, listen. She's special. She sees things. Don't freak out if she knows stuff she shouldn't." Sephiroth nodded. "I am not here to be surprised, Zack. I am here to be educated." Zack pushed the doors open. The sound of the hinges groaning echoed into the vast, empty space. Sephiroth stepped inside. The first thing that hit him was the smell. It wasn't the rot of the slums. It was sweet, delicate. It was the scent of yellow lilies. The floor of the church was not stone or wood. It was a garden. Patches of earth had broken through the floorboards, and from that meager soil, flowers were blooming. Thousands of them. They glowed softly in the shafts of light that pierced the gloom. Sephiroth took a step forward, his boots crunching on the wood, and then the noise stopped. For days, ever since he had opened that file in the basement, there had been a low-frequency hum in the back of his mind. A static, a whisper, reunion, mother, come home. It was the song of Jenova vibrating in his cells. But the moment he stepped into the circle of flowers, the voice was cut off. It was as if someone had thrown a heavy blanket over a screaming speaker. Silence. Beautiful, empty silence. Sephiroth exhaled, a breath he felt he had been holding for 72 hours. "Zack?" The voice came from the front of the church. A girl stood up from a bed of flowers near the altar. She brushed the dirt from her pink dress and turned. Her hair was tied back in a long, thick braid, defying gravity with a ribbon that matched the flowers. Her eyes were green, not the glowing, toxic green of Mako, but the deep, vibrant green of a forest canopy. "Hey, Aerith." Zack waved, his smile genuine and soft. "Long time no see. Brought some friends. Hope that's okay." Aerith walked toward them. She moved with a strange grace, stepping over the floorboards as if she knew exactly where the weak spots were. She looked at Zack, beaming, but then her gaze slid past him. She looked at Sephiroth. She stopped. The smile didn't vanish, but it changed. It became guarded, curious. She tilted her head, her green eyes scanning him from his boots to his silver hair. She didn't look at his face. She looked around him, as if studying the air that displaced his body. "You're very loud," Aerith said. Sephiroth blinked. "I have not spoken." "Not your voice," Aerith corrected. She took a step closer, fearless. "Your spirit. It's screaming. It's so loud I can barely hear the flowers." Sephiroth felt a chill run down his spine. "You can hear the flowers? They whisper," she said simply. "But you sound like a storm." She frowned, stepping even closer until she was standing right in front of him. She had to crane her neck to look up at him. "But there's something else. Under the storm, someone is crying." Zack watched them, tense. Cloud was frozen by the door, unsure of what was happening. "Who are you?" Sephiroth asked. His voice was stripped of its command. He felt naked before this girl from the slums. "I'm Aerith," she said. "And you are the general, Sephiroth. Everyone knows the silver hair." "I am..." Sephiroth hesitated. He wanted to say, "I am a monster." He wanted to say, "I am the son of Jenova," but the words wouldn't come. "I am lost." Aerith studied him for another moment. Then she smiled. It was a sad, knowing smile. "Well, this is a good place for lost things. The church catches everything that falls from the plate." She gestured to the pews. "Sit. You look like you've been carrying the sky." Sephiroth sat. He sat on a rotting wooden pew in a slum church, wearing borrowed clothes, while the most powerful entity in the world, the last Cetra, sat across from him. "Zack says you know about the ancients," Sephiroth said, getting straight to the point. He needed answers before the silence broke and the voices returned. "The Cetra," Aerith corrected gently. "That's what we called ourselves. Ancients makes us sound like dusty old books." "We?" Sephiroth latched onto the word. "So it is true. You are one of them." "I am the last one," Aerith said. She picked up a lily and twirled it in her fingers. "My mother died when I was little. Now it's just me, and the voices of the planet." Sephiroth leaned forward. The intensity in his eyes was terrifying, but Aerith didn't flinch. "Tell me, is there another Cetra?" Aerith shook her head. No, Sephiroth pressed. "Another entity, something from the past, something that the Cetra fought." Aerith went still. The flower in her hand stopped spinning. Her eyes darkened. The atmosphere in the church shifted instantly from sanctuary to tomb. "The calamity," she whispered. The word seemed to suck the warmth out of the air. "The crisis from the sky." "Jenova," Sephiroth named it. Aerith flinched. She physically recoiled, pressing her back against the pew. "Don't say that name, please. It hurts the earth to hear it." "She is my mother," Sephiroth said. The confession hung in the air. Zack looked at the floor. Cloud gasped quietly in the back. Aerith stared at him. Her eyes widened, filling with a mixture of horror and profound pity. She looked at him not as a man, but as a vessel. "No," Aerith said firmly. "She is not your mother. She is a sickness. She fell from the stars a long, long time ago. She tricked the Cetra. She looked like us. She spoke like us. She told us she was our friend, our family. And then, she ate everything." Aerith reached out. Her hand hovered over Sephiroth's arm, sensing the energy beneath the skin. "You have her cells," Aerith observed quietly. "I can feel them. They're cold. They are empty. That is why you hear her. She is trying to wake up." "I was told," Sephiroth said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage, "that she was an ancient, that I was the heir to this planet." "That is a lie," Aerith said, her voice ringing with the authority of a queen. "She is the enemy of this planet. She destroys life to feed herself. If you are her heir, then you are the heir to nothing, to a void." Sephiroth closed his eyes. It was the confirmation he had dreaded, but also the one he needed. Hojo had lied. Shinra had lied. He was not the prince of the earth. He was the carrier of the plague. "Then I should die," Sephiroth whispered. to protect the planet. No! Aerith grabbed his hand. Her skin was warm, rough from gardening. The contact sent a shock through Sephiroth. It wasn't painful. It was grounding. You are not her, Aerith said fiercely. You are Sephiroth. I hear the crying, remember? The crying is you, the little boy who is scared. That part is human. That part belongs to the planet. She squeezed his hand. You have a choice, she told him. The calamity takes away choice. It makes you a puppet. But you are here. You are asking questions. That means the strings are cut. Sephiroth looked at their joined hands, the monster and the guardian, touching. The strings are cut, he repeated. Suddenly, the doors of the church slammed open. The light from the outside was blocked by silhouettes. 3 men in dark suits, the Turks. Well, well, a voice drawled. It was lazy, arrogant, and sharp. Look what we have here, a family reunion, and here I thought we were just coming to pick up the flower girl. Reno walked in, twirling a baton charged with electricity. Beside him was Rude, silent and imposing in his sunglasses. Behind them, Seng stepped into the light. Seng looked at Sephiroth, then at Aerith holding his hand. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes were calculating. General, Seng said smoothly, we were tracking a fugitive signal. We didn't expect to find you fraternizing with the target. Sephiroth stood up. As he rose, the air in the church changed. The fragility of the moment vanished. The lost mechanic disappeared, and the general returned. The temperature dropped. The killing intent that flooded the room was so potent that the flowers seemed to wilt away from him. He didn't draw the Masamune. He didn't need to. Target? Sephiroth asked. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder. The Ancient, Seng said, gesturing to Aerith. Hojo wants her, and the President wants her. We have orders to bring her in, securely. Zack stepped up beside Sephiroth, his hand on the hilt of the Buster Sword. Back off, Reno. She's not going anywhere. Ooh, scary soldier boys, Reno smirked, sparks flying from his baton. But you know the rules, Zack. Don't interfere with Turk business, unless you want to be written up for treason. I am dissolving the order, Sephiroth stated. The Turks froze. Reno's smirk faltered. Excuse me, General? Seng asked. The order to detain Aerith Gainsborough is rescinded, Sephiroth said. He took a step forward, placing himself physically between the Turks and the girl. She is under my protection. She is essential to my investigation regarding the security of the planet. That is not your call to make, Seng said, his hand drifting toward the gun inside his jacket. Is it not? Sephiroth tilted his head. His eyes narrowed, the cat-like pupils contracting. I am the general of the Shinra army. I am the hero of Wutai. If you wish to take her, Seng, you will have to go through me. He unclipped the canvas roll from his back. The heavy cloth fell away, revealing the 7-foot Nodachi, the Masamune. The Turks took a collective step back. Even Rude looked uneasy. No one fought Sephiroth and lived. You are making a mistake, Seng warned. The president will not like this. The president sits in a chair in the sky, Sephiroth said coldly. I am standing right here. Choose your next move very carefully, Turks. Silence stretched in the church. The tension was brittle, ready to snap. Seng looked at Sephiroth. He saw the resolve. He saw that this wasn't a bluff. He also saw that Sephiroth wasn't acting as a loyal dog of the company anymore. Seng withdrew his hand from his jacket. We are not paid enough to fight you, General. Tseng said. He signaled to Reno and Rude. We will report this. You know what that means. You will be declared rogue. Let them declare it, Sephiroth said. Tseng nodded once, a curt, professional gesture. See you around, Aerith. The Turks backed out of the church, fading into the shadows of the slums. Sephiroth waited until their footsteps faded completely. He did not sheathe his sword. He turned to Aerith. They will return, Sephiroth said. In greater numbers. You are not safe here. Aerith looked at the sword, then up at his face. She wasn't afraid. She looked relieved. I know, she said. I've been running from them for a long time. You do not have to run anymore, Sephiroth vowed. The promise felt heavy, binding. It was a new purpose. He wasn't fighting for Shinra. He wasn't fighting for Jenova. He was fighting for the one thing that could stop them both. Pack your things, Sephiroth commanded, looking at Zack and Cloud. We are leaving the sector. We are going to the surface, but not to the tower. Where then? Zack asked, exhilarated by the standoff. Sephiroth looked at the holes in the roof, at the slivers of sky. To the ends of the earth, Sephiroth said. We are going to find a way to kill a god. There is a particular kind of violence in the act of discovery. We tend to think of the truth as a light, something pure that illuminates the dark corners of our ignorance. But sometimes, the truth is not a light. Sometimes, it is a scalpel. It cuts through the protective layers of lies we have wrapped around ourselves to keep warm. And when those layers are stripped away, we are left shivering, bleeding, staring at the raw meat of our own origins. For Sephiroth, the journey back up the Shinra Tower was a funeral procession. They had not gone to the gates. They had not tried to sneak out through the train graveyard. Sephiroth knew that as long as Hojo breathed, there would be no escape. The professor had the tracking data. He had the biological keys. He would hunt them to the edge of the map, not out of malice, but out of scientific curiosity. To Hojo, Sephiroth was not a fugitive. He was a wandering asset. The elevator climbed past the 60th floor. Inside the car, the air was thick. Sephiroth stood in the front, his eyes closed. Zack stood behind him, the Buster sword drawn, his body angled to shield the two civilians in the corner. Cloud looked pale, gripping a stolen rifle. Aerith stood with her hands clasped in prayer, her eyes fixed on the back of Sephiroth's coat. She could feel it, the intention. It wasn't the chaotic static of the Jenova cells anymore. It was a cold, sharp singularity. It was the intent to kill. You don't have to do this, Aerith whispered. Her voice was small against the hum of the elevator. Killing him won't change who you are. Sephiroth didn't open his eyes. I know. I'm not doing this for redemption, Aerith. I'm doing it for sanitation. The elevator chimed. Floor 67. The doors slid open. The lab was dark. The only light came from the glowing green pillars of the specimen tanks and the massive central containment unit labeled Jenova. Sephiroth stepped out. His boots made no sound on the tile. He moved like a ghost, a phantom returning to haunt the castle. Stay by the doors, Sephiroth commanded. Zack, if anyone other than me tries to enter this room, cut them down. You got it, Zack said, his voice tight. He ushered Cloud and Aerith into the alcove by the elevator bank, taking up a defensive stance. Sephiroth walked down the central aisle of the lab. To his left and right, twisted creatures floated in Mako suspension. Failed experiments, distorted lions, soldiers with insect limbs, the debris of Hojo's genius. At the far end of the room, standing before the main console, was the professor. Hojo didn't turn around. He was typing furiously, his hunchbacked shadow cast long against the wall by the glow of the screens. "I knew you would come back," Hojo said. His voice was conversational, bored. "You always come back. The conditioning is too deep. The homing instinct is written into your genetic code." Sephiroth stopped 10 feet away. He rested his hand on the hilt of the Masamune. "I am not here to report, Professor." Hojo spun around on his heel. He pushed his glasses up his nose, peering at Sephiroth with a mixture of amusement and irritation. "Obviously," Hojo sneered. "You're here to throw a tantrum. I saw the footage from the church. Protecting the ancient? Really, Sephiroth? It's so pedestrian. I expected more from my masterpiece than a sudden development of a hero complex." "Tell me about Lucretia," Sephiroth said. The name landed in the room like a grenade. Hojo blinked. For a split second, the arrogance faltered. He looked genuinely surprised. "Lucretia?" Hojo repeated. He let out a short, wheezing laugh. "Who told you that name? Was it the Turk? Or did you dig through my private archives? I thought I encrypted those files." "Was she my mother?" Sephiroth asked. The question was simple, but the pain behind it was complex. He needed to know if he came from a human. He needed to know if he had been born, or if he had been grown. Hojo sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mother, such a sentimental word. Biologically? Yes. She provided the egg. She provided the womb. But she was merely the incubator, Sephiroth. The vessel. She was a scientist," Sephiroth stated. "She was a brilliant scientist," Hojo corrected, his eyes gleaming with a twisted nostalgia. "But she was weak. She fell in love. Not with me, of course. No one falls in love with the intellect. She fell in love with the science, with the possibility." Hojo began to pace, gesturing wildly at the Jenova tank behind him. "She wanted to push the boundaries," Hojo continued. "She offered herself for the project. She wanted to carry the hybrid. She wanted to prove that humanity could evolve." "She offered herself?" Sephiroth felt the floor tilt. "Oh, don't look so tragic," Hojo scoffed. "She begged for it. She wanted to birth a god. And when the cells started to change her, when the baby started to eat her from the inside out, she didn't weep for herself. She wept for you. She wanted you to be perfect." Sephiroth felt a cold numbness spreading through his chest. She hadn't been a victim. She had been a participant. She had sold him to Hojo before he even had a heartbeat. "And then?" Sephiroth asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What happened to her?" Hojo waved a dismissive hand. "She died. Complications during the birth. The trauma was extensive. We couldn't save her. But we saved the specimen. We saved you." "You let her die," Sephiroth said. "I prioritize the asset," Hojo snapped. "Science requires sacrifice, Sephiroth." Lucretia understood that. She was a martyr for the evolution of our species. And look at the result. Look at you. Hojo spread his arms wide, as if presenting Sephiroth to an invisible audience. "You are the apex!" Hojo shouted, his voice echoing off the glass tanks. "You are the synthesis of ancient and human. You are the reunion. And you dare to stand there and judge me. I am your creator. I am your father." The word hung in the air. Father, Sephiroth, looked at the man. He looked at the grease stains on his lab coat. He looked at the madness in his eyes. He looked at the absolute lack of love. This man had cut open the woman he supposedly loved. He had injected an alien virus into his own unborn son. He had watched that son grow up in a cage, testing him, pushing him, breaking him, all to prove a theory. Sephiroth's hand tightened on the sword. "You are not my father," Sephiroth said softly. He drew the Masamune. The sound of the blade leaving the scabbard was a sing-song ring of steel. It was beautiful. Hojo froze. He looked at the sword, then back at Sephiroth's face. He saw the eyes. The cat-like pupils were vertical slits, but they weren't glowing with the frenzy of the reunion. They were cold, dead cold. "Sephiroth," Hojo warned, taking a step back. "Think about this. If you kill me, you kill the only man who understands your physiology. You will degrade. You will fall apart. You need me." "I would rather rot," Sephiroth said. He moved. It wasn't a dash. It was a teleportation of mass. One moment, Sephiroth was 10 feet away. The next, he was standing directly in front of the scientist. Hojo opened his mouth to scream. The Masamune flashed. It was a single, precise thrust. The blade entered Hojo's chest, piercing the heart, and exited through the back of the lab coat. Sephiroth didn't twist the blade. He didn't gloat. He simply held it there, pinning the man to the spot. Hojo gasped. Blood bubbled up to his lips. He looked down at the steel in his chest, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked up at Sephiroth, trying to form a word, perhaps a curse, perhaps a final command, but the life faded too fast. The light in Hojo's eyes dimmed, replaced by the dull gloss of death. His knees buckled. Sephiroth withdrew the blade. Hojo's body collapsed to the floor, a heap of dirty laundry and wasted genius. Sephiroth stood over him. He flicked the sword once, a sharp motion that cleaned the blood from the steel, splattering a red arc across the white tiles. He looked at the corpse. He felt nothing. No joy. No regret. Just a quiet sense of finality. A loose end, cauterized. "Goodbye, Professor," Sephiroth said. He turned his back on the body and looked at the tank behind the console. Jenova, the headless female form, floated in the liquid. The plaque read, "Jenova Project, property of Shinra." Sephiroth walked up to the glass. He placed his gloved hand against it. The creature inside didn't move, but the pressure in his mind spiked. Son. Son. "Quiet," Sephiroth ordered. He raised his sword again. He could break the glass. He could hack the body to pieces. But he knew, instinctively, that destroying the body wouldn't stop the reunion. The cells were everywhere. They were in the soldiers. They were in the clones. They were in him. Destroying the body was a task for later. Right now, he had to save the living. He sheathed the Masamune and walked back toward the elevator. Zack was waiting, his face pale. He had seen the kill. He had seen the coldness of it. "Is it done?" Zack asked. "It is done," Sephiroth said. "He was..." Zack swallowed hard. "He was really your dad?" "Biologically," Sephiroth said, walking past him. "But I have no father. I have only comrades." He looked at Cloud. The boy was shaking. "Can you move, Trooper?" Sephiroth asked gently. Cloud nodded furiously. "Yes, sir." "Then move. The alarms will trigger in." Sephiroth glanced at the flashing red light on the console. 3 seconds. Wee-oo! Wee-oo! The facility bathed in emergency red light. A mechanical voice blared from the speakers. "Security breach on floor 67. Subject H deceased. Level 1 alert. Lockdown imminent." "Go!" Sephiroth barked. They ran. Not to the elevator, it would be locked down. They ran for the emergency stairs. Sephiroth took the rear guard. As they burst into the stairwell, he looked back one last time at the lab. The red lights reflected off the pools of blood. The professor was dead. The secret of Lucretia was out. The general was gone. Now they were just fugitives in a city of steel, and the hunt was on. To fall from grace is to realize that grace was never a state of being, but a location. It was a pedestal. And pedestals are narrow, lonely places where you are not allowed to move. When you step off, when you finally let gravity take you, the wind rushing past your ears sounds terrifyingly like freedom. The stairwell of the Shinra building was a vertical tunnel of concrete and echoing boots. 67 floors. It was a long way down. Sephiroth did not run. He descended with a fluid, terrifying speed, sliding down the railings, vaulting over the landings. He moved like water flowing downhill, inevitable and fast. Above them, the blast doors of the science department slammed shut with a concussive boom that shook the dust from the walls. "They're sealing the upper levels," Zack shouted from above. He was carrying the bulk of the supplies, his buster sword clanking against the railing as he bounded down the stairs, 3 at a time. "We're being herded. They want us in the lobby." "They want a kill box," Sephiroth corrected. His voice was calm, cutting through the panic of the siren. "Heidegger will have deployed the riot troopers at the main entrance. Turrets, mechs. If we walk out the front door, we are dead." "So we don't walk," Zack grunted, landing heavily on the 40th floor landing. He checked on Aerith and Cloud, who were gasping for air, their lungs burning from the exertion. "We drive." "The showroom?" Sephiroth asked. "Floor 10, Zack confirmed. "They keep the prototypes there, the Hardy Daytonas, the haulers." "Good." They continued the descent. The air grew warmer as they went lower, the sterile chill of the labs replaced by the recycled heat of the offices. At the 10th floor, Sephiroth kicked the door open. It flew off its hinges, clattering across the polished linoleum of the vehicle showroom. The room was vast, lined with, the pride of Shinra's engineering. Sleek motorcycles, heavy transport trucks, and armored personnel carriers, all gleaming under the spotlights. "Pick a ride," Zack yelled, sprinting toward a massive 6-wheeled transport truck. "Cloud, get in the back. Aerith, cab with me. Sephiroth, you want the shotgun?" Sephiroth walked past the truck. He stopped in front of a Hardy Daytona. It was a beast of a machine, black steel and chrome, with an engine block that looked big enough to power a small town. "I will take point," Sephiroth said. He swung a leg over the bike. It fit him. It was a predator, just like him. "I will clear the path. You follow close. Do not stop. Do not hesitate." He keyed the ignition. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated in his chest. It sounded like a dragon waking up. Zack fired up the truck. "Ready when you are, General." Sephiroth revved the engine. He looked at the floor-to-ceiling glass window that looked out over the Midgar skyline. Beyond that glass was the highway. "Hold on," Sephiroth commanded. He dropped the clutch. The bike shrieked, tires smoking on the showroom floor. He accelerated straight toward the window. Glass is a solid, but against enough force, it behaves like water. Sephiroth hit the pane at 80 miles per hour. The window exploded outward in a shower of diamond shards. The bike sailed into the night air, gravity catching it, pulling it down toward the upper highway ramp 20 feet below. The bike landed with a heavy thud, shocks groaning but holding. Sephiroth stabilized instantly, drifting into a perfect slide to align with the traffic. Behind him, the truck crashed down. sparks flying as its heavy frame slammed onto the asphalt. Zack wrestled the wheel, straightening the vehicle out. "We are clear!" Zack's voice crackled over the PHS earpiece. "Head for the sector gate." They tore down the highway. The wind whipped Sephiroth's hair into a silver banner behind him. For a moment, it felt like flying. The city blurred into streaks of green and orange neon. But Shinra did not let its property go so easily. "Alert," Sephiroth said into the comms. "Hostiles at 6 o'clock." Behind the truck, 3 sleek red motorcycles were weaving through traffic, soldier bikes, and behind them, a massive armored tank on treads, crushing the civilian cars in its path. "It's the Moth Slasher!" Cloud's voice came over the line, high and panicked. "They sent a prototype tank." "Focus, Cloud," Sephiroth said. "Shoot the treads!" Sephiroth slowed down, letting the truck pass him. He dropped back to the rear guard. He drew the Masamune with his left hand, keeping his right on the throttle. The soldiers on the bikes accelerated. They were third class. Boys. He recognized their uniforms. He recognized the formation. Delta attack pattern. He had written the manual on it. They raised their guns. Sephiroth didn't wait. He swung the Masamune. He didn't aim for the riders. He aimed for the machines. The 7-foot blade sliced through the air, cutting the front tires of the lead bikes in half. The physics took over. The bikes flipped, skidding across the highway in a shower of sparks. The riders tumbled, rolling safely thanks to their enhanced physiology, but they were out of the fight. "I said do not kill them!" Sephiroth shouted to himself, though the wind stole the words. He was reassuring his own conscience. The tank was next. Its turret swiveled, locking onto the truck. A cannon shell loaded. Sephiroth twisted the throttle. The Daytona surged forward. He rode up the side of the highway barrier, defying gravity, his bike almost horizontal. He flanked the tank. He leaped from the bike. For a second, he was suspended in the air above the highway, a silver angel of death. He brought the sword down. Clang. He didn't cut the tank in half. That would cause an explosion. Instead, he drove the blade through the main cannon barrel, pinning the mechanism. He landed back on the saddle of his bike as it coasted beneath him. The tank fired. The shell detonated inside the crushed barrel. The explosion was contained, blowing the turret off the chassis, but leaving the crew compartment intact. The burning wreck ground to a halt. "Threat neutralized," Sephiroth stated calmly. "Show off!" Zack cheered over the radio. They were nearing the edge of the plate, the end of the highway, the great gate that separated the city of Midgar from the wasteland beyond. It was closed. A wall of steel bars blocked the road. Behind it, a squad of riot troopers stood with shields locked, rifles raised. "Ram it?" Zack asked. "No," Sephiroth said. "The truck won't survive the impact. Stop." "Stop? Are you crazy? We're sitting ducks." "Trust me." Sephiroth drifted his bike to a halt 50 yards from the gate. The truck screeched to a stop behind him. The firing line of troopers adjusted their aim. There were 50 of them. Sephiroth dismounted. He walked toward them. He walked slowly, his sword sheathed, his hands empty and visible at his sides. The troopers hesitated. This was the general. This was the man whose poster hung in their barracks. This was the man who had led them through the fires of Wuti. "Hold fire!" the sergeant screamed, his voice cracking. It's him." Sephiroth stopped 10 paces from the shield wall. He looked at them. He didn't look at them with hatred. He looked at them with disappointment. "Stand down," Sephiroth commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a simple order, spoken with the absolute conviction of a man who expects to be obeyed. "Sir," the sergeant stammered, "we have orders. Level 1 alert. Use of lethal force authorized." "I know your orders," Sephiroth said. "I wrote them." He took another step. "I am leaving this city," Sephiroth said. "I am taking these people with me. You have a choice. You can open that gate, or you can die here. And you all know, that I do not make idle threats." The silence on the highway was heavier than the steel plate above. The wind howled through the cables. The troopers looked at each other. They looked at the Masamune on his back. They looked at the tank burning in the distance behind him. Then, slowly, the sergeant lowered his rifle. "Open the gate," the sergeant whispered. "Sir?" a private asked. "Open the damn gate! We can't stop him! Do you want to die for a paycheck?" The mechanism groaned. The heavy bars began to rise. Sephiroth nodded once to the sergeant, a gesture of respect. "Thank you, Sergeant," Sephiroth said. "Do not follow us." He walked back to his bike. He mounted up. Zack revved the truck engine, giving a small, confused salute to the troopers as they rolled past. They passed under the gate. The lights of the tunnel gave way to the darkness of the outside world. They were out. The highway ended, crumbling into a dirt road that wound its way into the Badlands. The air changed instantly. The smell of ozone and exhaust vanished, replaced by the scent of dry earth, sage, and the vast open wind. Sephiroth slowed the bike. He pulled over to the side of the cliff overlooking the city. The truck pulled up beside him. They all got out. They stood on the precipice, looking back at Midgar. From this distance, the city looked like a glowing jewel, a beautiful, poisonous jewel. "We made it," Cloud breathed, his legs shaking as he hopped down from the truck bed. "We're fugitives," Zack said, leaning against the hood of the truck. He looked at Sephiroth. "Shinra will never stop hunting us. You know that, right?" "Let them hunt," Sephiroth said. He was looking at the stars. Real stars, not the light bulbs of the plate. "They are hunting a ghost. The general died in that lab, Zack." Aerith walked up to the edge of the cliff. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath of the wind. "The planet," she whispered. "It feels different here. It's hurt. The land is dry, but it's awake." "Where do we go?" Cloud asked. He looked small in the vastness of the wasteland. "We have no supplies. No map." Sephiroth turned away from the city. He looked out into the dark unknown of the continent. "We go to Calm," Sephiroth said. "We regroup. We gather information." "And then?" Zack asked. "And then?" Sephiroth said, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "We find the black materia. Before the reunion does." He looked at his hand. The trembling was gone. The voice of Jenova was faint, a distant radio signal lost in the static of the wind. He was an enemy of the state. He was a monster to his father. He was a traitor to his army. But for the first time in his life, standing in the dirt with the wind in his hair, Sephiroth felt like a man. "Mount up," Sephiroth ordered. "The night is young." They got back into the vehicles. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the rocky path ahead. The convoy of the fallen hero moved out, driving away from the city of lights and into the shadows of history. The ocean is not silent. We tend to think of water as peaceful, a rhythmic lullaby that rocks the world to sleep. But to a mind that is fraying at the edges, the ocean is a cacophony. It is the sound of millions of gallons of water grinding against the earth, a relentless, churning, chaotic static that never stops. It hides things. It buries things. And sometimes, when the fog rolls in off the coast, it feels like the ocean is trying to climb onto the land to drag you back down into the dark. For Sephiroth, the road to Junon was not a journey of liberation. It was a descent into a waking nightmare. They had been riding for 3 days since leaving the safe haven of Kalm. The landscape had shifted from the rocky Badlands to the lush, damp forests of the western continent. The air here was wet. It clung to the skin. It made the leather of his coat feel heavy, like a second skin that was slowly tightening, trying to suffocate him. The convoy had stopped for the night in a clearing a few miles south of the great military port. The sun had set behind the heavy cloud layer, plunging the forest into a premature twilight. Sephiroth stood at the edge of the camp, his back to the fire. He was staring into the dense tree line. His hand hovered over the hilt of the Masamune. "Sir?" The voice was tentative. "Cloud." Sephiroth didn't turn. His eyes were darting back and forth, scanning the shadows. "Do you see them, Cloud?" Sephiroth whispered. "See who, sir?" Cloud asked, stepping closer, clutching a bundle of firewood. "The spies," Sephiroth hissed. "They're in the trees. I can hear their breathing. Wet. Ragged." Cloud squinted into the dark. There was nothing there. Just the wind rustling the pine needles and the distant rhythmic crash of the surf against the cliffs. I don't see anyone, General," Cloud said, his voice trembling slightly. "They are hiding," Sephiroth murmured. He drew his sword an inch. The metal scraped against the scabbard, a sharp sound that made the birds in the canopy go silent. "They are waiting for me to sleep. They want to take me back to the tank. They want to put the wires back in my head." "Sephiroth." Zack appeared at his side. He didn't look at the trees. He looked at Sephiroth's face. The general was pale, his skin possessing a translucent, sickly quality. There was sweat beading on his forehead, despite the chill in the air. His pupils were blown wide, consuming the green iris, leaving only black pools of terror. "Nobody is there," Zack said firmly. He placed a hand on Sephiroth's shoulder. Sephiroth flinched violently, spinning around, the Masamune half drawn. Zack didn't back down. He stood his ground, hands raised peacefully. "It's just me. It's Zack, your partner, remember?" Sephiroth stared at him. For a second, he didn't see Zack Fair. He saw a faceless trooper. He saw a scientist in a lab coat. The reality of the world was flickering like a broken film reel. Then, slowly, the image stabilized. The spiky black hair, the earnest blue eyes, the stupid grin that was currently replaced by deep concern. "Zack," Sephiroth breathed, the tension leaking out of his frame. He slammed the sword back into its sheath. I apologize. My sensors are malfunctioning." "You're tired," Zack said gently. "You haven't slept since Calm. You can't keep running on adrenaline and Mako fumes." "If I sleep, she speaks," Sephiroth confessed. He walked back toward the fire, his movements stiff and jerky. "The closer we get to Junon, the louder it gets. The ocean carries her voice." They sat around the fire. The flames crackled, casting dancing shadows against the trees. To Sephiroth, the shadows looked like tentacles. They looked like the things he had seen in the Nibelheim reactor. Aerith was sitting on a log, stirring a pot of stew. She watched Sephiroth with sad, knowing eyes. She didn't offer him a healing spell. She knew that magic couldn't fix a fractured psyche. Instead, she offered him a bowl. "Eat," Aerith said. "It's warm. It will help ground you." Sephiroth took the bowl. His hands were shaking so bad the spoon clattered against the rim. He stared at the stew. The chunks of meat looked like... He closed his eyes. "Focus. It is just food." "Tell me about Junon," Sephiroth said, forcing the conversation to tactics, to logic. Logic was safe. "What is the status of the garrison?" Zack took a bite of his own dinner. "Heavy. It's the main naval base. If Rufus is hunting us, and we know he is, he'll have the port locked down. We need to cross the ocean to get to the western continent, to chase the Sephiroth. The Jenova trail. But getting a boat is going to be tricky." "We do not need a boat," Sephiroth said, his voice flat. "We need a ship, a cargo vessel, something large enough to hide the vehicles." "We could steal a helicopter?" Cloud suggested, trying to be helpful. "Too loud," Sephiroth dismissed. "And they have anti-air batteries. I installed them myself 3 years ago. They are calibrated to shoot down anything smaller than a dragon." "So we sneak in," Zack mused. "Disguises?" "Junon is a military city," Sephiroth said. "Everyone wears a uniform. We would need..." He stopped. He tilted his head. Come to the water." The voice was a drill in his temple. Sephiroth dropped the bowl. It shattered on the rocks. He clutched his head, his fingers digging into his scalp. "Make it stop," he groaned. She is right here." "Sephiroth!" Aerith dropped her spoon and rushed to his side. She placed her hands on his temples. A soft, white light glowed from her palms. "Get out of his head!" Aerith commanded, her voice surprisingly powerful. She wasn't speaking to Sephiroth. She was speaking to the entity connecting to him. The white light flared. Sephiroth gasped, arching his back. The static in his brain cleared for a moment, replaced by the warm, earthy sensation of the Cetra's presence. He slumped forward, panting. "Thank you," he whispered. "We need to move," Aerith said, looking into the darkness. "The connection is getting stronger because we're sitting still. We need to distract him. Sephiroth, look at me." He looked up. "What is Junon like?" she asked. "Not the military stuff. What does it look like?" Sephiroth blinked. He tried to access a memory that wasn't tainted by war. "It is gray," he said. "Steel plates, massive cannons. But underneath, there's the old village, under Junon. It smells of salt and dead fish. The people there, they live in the shadow of the weapon." "We'll go there," Zack decided. "Under Junon, we can find a smuggler, someone who hates Shinra enough to ferry us across." "We should go now," Sephiroth said, standing up. "I cannot stay in this forest. The trees possess eyes." They broke camp in record time. The urgency in Sephiroth's demeanor was contagious. They could feel his terror radiating off him like heat. They left the vehicles hidden in a dense thicket of brush, the Daytona, and the truck were too conspicuous for the fishing village. They proceeded on foot. The path down to the coast was steep. The roar of the ocean grew louder with every step. And then the city loomed out of the mist. Junon, a fortress built into the side of a cliff. The massive cannon, the sister ray, pointed out toward the horizon like an accusing finger. The city lights above were blindingly bright, but down below, in the shadow of the structure, the fishing village was dim and weary. They walked into under Junon. The air was thick with the smell of brine. The houses were dilapidated. built from the scrap metal that fell from the plate above. Sephiroth pulled the hood of his cloak low. He was a giant among these people. He tried to shrink, to make himself small, but his presence was undeniable. "Hey!" a voice called out. An old man sat on a crate by the water's edge, mending a net. He squinted at them. "You lot don't look like locals," the old man grunted. "And you're too clean to be sailors. Shinra?" "Ex-Shinra," Zack said quickly, flashing a charming smile. "We're independent contractors, looking for passage west." The old man laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. "West? Costa del Sol? Nobody goes west these days unless they're on a luxury cruise or a troop transport. The ocean's dangerous. Monsters." "We can handle monsters," Cloud said, puffing out his chest. The old man looked at Cloud, then at the massive shape of Sephiroth lurking in the back. His eyes widened. He recognized the silhouette. Everyone in the world knew the silhouette of the hero. "Merciful Minerva," the old man whispered. You're him, the dead general." Sephiroth stepped forward. He lowered his hood. His face was gaunt, his eyes haunted, but the intensity was still there. "I am not dead," Sephiroth said softly, "but I am being chased. We need a ship. Now." The old man scrambled up, knocking over his crate. I can't help you. The mayor, he'd kill me. Shinra has spies everywhere. There's a patrol due in 5 minutes." "A patrol," Sephiroth repeated. As if summoned by the word, the sound of boots on metal echoed from the elevator shaft that connected the upper city to the village. "Hide!" Zack hissed. They ducked into the shadows of a boat shed. A squad of soldiers marched out of the elevator. They weren't standard infantry. They wore red uniforms, deep red. "That's not Shinra," Cloud whispered. "It is," Sephiroth said, his voice vibrating with recognition. "That is the ceremonial guard, which means Rufus," Zack finished. "The vice president is here." Sephiroth watched through the cracks in the wood. He saw the soldiers fanning out. They weren't looking for smugglers. They were setting up a perimeter. And then he felt it. It wasn't the voice of Jenova. It was a different sensation, a resonance. "Do you feel that?" Sephiroth asked. "Feel what?" Zack asked. "Another one," Sephiroth said. "Like me, but wrong." He pushed open the door of the shed. "Sephiroth, wait!" Zack grabbed his arm. "No," Sephiroth pulled away. "It is close, I must see." He walked out into the open, down near the waterline, away from the soldiers. A figure was standing. It was draped in a black cloak. It stood perfectly still, staring at the waves. Sephiroth walked toward it. The soldiers were busy harassing the locals. They didn't see him yet. The figure turned. It had no face, just a hood filled with darkness. On the sleeve of the cloak, a number was tattooed into the pale, dead flesh of a visible hand. 4. "Brother," Sephiroth whispered. The clone didn't speak. It just pointed. It pointed toward the open ocean, toward the west. Reunion. The word wasn't in Sephiroth's head this time. It was spoken. The clone's voice was a gurgle, a wet sound of decaying vocal cords. "Reunion!" Sephiroth felt a surge of nausea. This thing, this shuffling corpse, this was his kin. This was what Hojo had made. "You are suffering," Sephiroth said. He drew the Masamune. The clone didn't flinch. It just kept pointing. "I will free you," Sephiroth vowed. He raised the sword. "Hey, you there!" The soldiers had spotted them. 3 red uniformed guards were running down the pier, rifles raised. "Drop the weapon!" Sephiroth didn't look at them. He was focused on the clone. The clone was a mirror, a dark, twisted mirror of what Sephiroth could become if he let the madness take him. "Sephiroth!" Zack screamed, sprinting from the shed. The soldiers opened fire. Sephiroth spun. He deflected the bullets with a casual flick of his wrist. Ping, ping, ping. The lead rounds flattened against the Masamune and fell uselessly to the wood. But the noise, the gunfire, it triggered the instinct. The world went red. Sephiroth wasn't in the fishing village anymore. He was back in the Wutai trenches. Kill or be killed. Silence the enemy. He lunged. He closed the distance to the soldiers in a blur. He raised the sword to decapitate the lid guard. "No!" Zack tackled the guard. Didn't attack Sephiroth. He threw himself in the way, knocking the Shinra soldier into the water. Sephiroth froze. The blade stopped inches from where Zack's head had been a second ago. Zack looked up from the edge of the pier. "Don't do it! We are not butchers! We are not them!" Sephiroth stared at his friend. He blinked. The red tint faded from his vision. The roar of the ocean returned. He looked at the sword in his hand. He had almost killed a kid in a dress uniform. He had almost killed Zack. Sephiroth stumbled back. "I lost it." "Yeah, you did," Zack said, climbing back up, dripping wet. "But you stopped. That's what matters." The other two soldiers were frozen in terror. They dropped their guns. They had just seen the supposedly dead hero move faster than the eye could follow. "Run," Sephiroth whispered to them. They didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled back toward the elevator, screaming for backup. "We have to go," Cloud said, running up with Aerith. "The whole garrison is going to be down here in 5 minutes." "The boat!" Zack pointed to a small cargo cutter moored at the end of the dock. "Priscilla's dolphin tours. It'll have to do." They ran for the boat. Sephiroth stopped for 1 second. He looked back at the clone. The robed man was still standing there, pointing west. "I will find the end of the road," Sephiroth said to the silent figure, "and I will burn it." He turned and leaped onto the deck of the cutter. Zack cut the mooring lines. Cloud fumbled with the ignition until the engine sputtered to life. As they pulled away from the dock, the alarm sirens of Junon began to wail. The massive cannon above groaned as it shifted gears, though it couldn't aim this low. Sephiroth stood at the stern of the small boat, watching the gray city recede into the mist. He felt sick. He felt weak. But he also felt a strange clarity. The enemy wasn't just Hojo. It wasn't just Jenova. It was the biology itself. The reunion instinct was a physical chain, and he had just seen the other prisoners. "West," Sephiroth said to the ocean. "We go west." The chase was real, but now he knew what was hunting him, and a known enemy can be killed. A mirror is a dangerous thing for a man who is unsure of his own soul. We look into the glass, hoping to see a reflection of who we are. Our face, our eyes, the lines of our history etched into our skin. But what happens when the mirror shows you something else? What happens when you look into the glass and see a monster staring back? Or worse, what happens when you look out at the world, at strangers passing on the road, and you realize that they are the mirror? Sephiroth was walking through a nightmare. The geography had changed. The humid forests of the eastern continent were gone, replaced by the dry, red dust of the coral region. The sun here was unforgiving. It baked the ground until it cracked, bleaching the bones of dead beasts and drying the rivers into jagged scars. They had been walking for days. The convoy vehicles, the truck, and the bike had been abandoned at the port of Costa del Sol. They were too conspicuous, too loud. Now they were refugees on foot, following the rusted train tracks that wound their way towards the mountains. Sephiroth walked in the lead. He wore a long traveler's cloak over his clothes, the hood pulled up to shield his face from the sun and from prying eyes. But he could not shield his mind. The closer they got to the mountains, the more frequent the sightings became. Figures in black, shuffling, limping, dragging themselves through the dust. They were everywhere. At first, Zack had thought they were beggars, refugees from the war. He had tried to offer them water. He had tried to offer them gil, but they didn't want water. They didn't want money. Reunion. The word drifted on the wind. It was a whisper, a moan, a desperate prayer. Sephiroth stopped. He stood in the middle of the old railway bridge looking ahead. Blocking the path was a cluster of them. 5 figures draped in ragged black cloth. They were huddled together like sheep in a storm, swaying back and forth. Sephiroth? Zack asked quietly, coming up beside him. More of them? Yes, Sephiroth said. His voice was brittle. The pilgrimage. Pilgrimage to where? Cloud asked, peering around Zack's shoulder. There's nothing out here but the old coal mines. To the north, Sephiroth answered. They are going to the crater. They are going home. To her. He took a step forward. The wood of the bridge creaked under his boot. The figures stopped swaying. They turned their heads in unison. They couldn't see his face under the hood, but they could feel him. They could feel the concentration of cells. They could feel the sun of the calamity. Master, one of them rasped. The figure stumbled forward. It reached out a hand. The sleeve of the robe fell back, revealing gray, necrotic skin. And there, tattooed in black ink, was a number. 11. Sephiroth didn't draw his sword. He walked up to the creature. He looked down into the hood. The face that looked back at him was barely human. The skin was melting, weeping Mako fluids. The eyes were white, blinded by the energy consuming the brain. But beneath the ruin, there was a structure, a familiarity. Sephiroth felt a jolt of recognition that hit him harder than any physical blow. I know you, Sephiroth whispered. The creature groaned, clutching at Sephiroth's cloak. It hurts. Burning. Mother. You're the innkeeper, Sephiroth said. The memory surfaced sharp and painful. The inn at Nibelheim. The man who had nervously asked for an autograph. The man who had served them stew and apologized for the drafty windows. This was him. Hojo hadn't just experimented on soldiers. He hadn't just taken the survivors of the fire. He had taken everyone, the villagers, the witnesses. He had injected them with the cells, tagged them like cattle, and turned them loose to see if they would migrate. What did they do, to you? Aerith asked, her voice trembling with tears. She was standing behind Sephiroth, her hands covering her mouth. They made him like me, Sephiroth said coldly. But he was not strong enough. His mind shattered. He looked at the other 4 figures. He recognized the baker, the mayor's assistant, a young man who used to work at the reactor. They were his ghosts. They were the people he was supposed to protect. And now, they were this. Reunion, the innkeeper moaned, falling to his knees. Please, take us. Take us to the promised land. Sephiroth looked down at the wretched thing clinging to his leg. He felt the pull. The cells in his own body were vibrating, trying to synchronize with the cells in the clones. Join them, the voice whispered. Lead them. Become the chorus. It would be so easy. He could become their shepherd. He could lead this army of the damned to the north and tear the world apart. But then he looked at Zack. Zack, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and absolute trust. Zack, who believed that Sephiroth was better than his biology. Sephiroth placed his hand on the innkeeper's head. I cannot take you to the promised land, Sephiroth said softly. There is no promised land for us. There is only the life stream. The innkeeper looked up, a moment of clarity piercing the madness. General? Rest now, Sephiroth said. He didn't use the Masamune. That was a weapon of war. This required a different touch. Sephiroth channeled his magic. Not fire, not lightning. He channeled a simple, non-elemental pulse of energy. A disruption. He sent the pulse directly into the clone's brainstem. It was instant. The innkeeper didn't scream. He simply exhaled. The tension left his body. He slumped forward against Sephiroth's boots, dead. Zack flinched. Sephiroth. He was in agony, Sephiroth said, his voice devoid of emotion, though his eyes were wet. His cells were eating him alive. There's no cure for this degradation, Zack. Even Aerith cannot fix what Hojo did. He looked at the other four. They were wailing now, confused by the death of their kin. We cannot leave them, Sephiroth stated. If we leave them, they will continue to crawl. They will suffer every mile until they reach the crater, and then they will be absorbed. To leave them is cruelty. He drew the Masamune. Turn away, Sephiroth commanded his friends. No, Zack said. He drew the Buster Sword. We're partners. We share the load. Sephiroth looked at him. This is my sin, Zack. These are my people. They were my friends too, Zack said stubbornly. I lived in that inn. I ate that bread. Zack walked up to one of the other clones, the baker. He looked at the creature with tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, Zack whispered. I'm so sorry. The blade descended. It was a massacre, but it was also a funeral. In the silence of the Coral Mountains, the two soldiers moved through the group. It was quick, efficient. Mercy is not always pretty. Sometimes, mercy is a blade in the dark. When it was done, 5 bodies lay still on the bridge. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying the dust of the wasteland. Aerith walked forward. She knelt beside the innkeeper. She placed her hands on the ground. I will return them, she whispered. The planet will take them back. It will wash the alien parts away. They will be clean. Green sparks of light rose from the earth, wrapping around the bodies. Slowly, they dissolved, fading into the life stream. No bodies to rot. No monsters to rise again. Just peace. Sephiroth sheathed his sword. The click of the guard hitting the scabbard echoed like a gunshot. He stood on the edge of the bridge, looking north. His face was hard. The melancholy was gone, replaced by a cold, burning fury. Hojo is dead, Sephiroth said. But his work is walking the earth. We'll find them, Cloud said, his voice small but determined. All of them. We won't let them suffer. Sephiroth looked at the boy. Cloud was holding up remarkably well. Perhaps because he didn't know the full truth that he too had been in those tanks, that he too had the cells. Sephiroth decided then and there that Cloud would never know. He would protect the boy from that reality, even if he had to burn the world to do it. The reunion, Sephiroth said to the wind. Jenova is calling her children home. He turned to the group. We are going to crash the party. How? Zack asked, wiping his sword on a piece of cloth. We stop the migration, Sephiroth said. We do not just run, we hunt. Every clone we find, we free. We deny her the biomass. We deny her the reunion. That's a lot of mercy killings, Zack said, his voice heavy. It is a penance, Sephiroth replied. For every life I took in Wutai, I will save a soul from her. He adjusted his cloak. Let's move. The sun is setting, and the shadows are getting long. They continued across the bridge. The mood had shifted. They were no longer just fugitives running from Shinra. They were executioners. They were the cleaners of a mess that spanned a continent. As they walked, Sephiroth kept his hand near his sword. He could still hear the voice. Reunion. Reunion. No, he thought, projecting the thought with all the force of his will. There will be no reunion. There will only be silence. The path ahead led to the gold saucer, a place of lights and noise, a place where people went to forget. But Sephiroth knew there would be no forgetting. Not for him. Not ever again. Time is not a line. We are taught to view history as a road that stretches from the past into the future, a straight path where cause leads to effect. But the ancients, the Cetra, they knew better. To them, time was a spiral. It was a labyrinth where the past and the future were constantly folding in on themselves, touching, whispering, bleeding together. The Temple of the Ancients was not built to house a treasure. It was built to trap a nightmare. And nightmares, as we know, do not respect the rules of geometry. The structure rose from the forest of the southern continent like a jagged tooth. It was a pyramid, but it was wrong. The angles were too sharp. The stone was too dark, absorbing the sunlight rather than reflecting it. It sat in the middle of a massive crater, surrounded by a labyrinth of ruins that smelled of wet moss and forgotten magic. Sephiroth stood at the entrance. The keystone, a mystical artifact they had wrestled from the chaotic neon grip of the gold saucer, hummed in Aerith's hand. It feels awake, Aerith whispered. She looked small standing next to the massive stone doors. The whole building, it's conscious. Sephiroth did not speak immediately. He was gripping the hilt of the Masamune so tightly his knuckles were white. It is screaming, Sephiroth corrected. To the others, the temple was silent. But to Sephiroth, it was a siren. The black materia was inside, the ultimate destructive magic. The tool that Jenova wanted to use to wound the planet so she could feed on the life stream. The call of it was pulling at his cells, a magnetic drag that made his knees weak. Can you do this? Zack asked. He was watching Sephiroth closely. The dynamic had shifted. Zack was no longer just the pupil. He was the caregiver. I must, Sephiroth said through gritted teeth. If Shinra gets it, Rufus will try to use it. He does not understand what it is. He thinks it is a weapon. It is not a weapon. It is a key to hell. Then we get it first, Cloud said, adjusting the strap of his rifle. And we lock it away. Aerith placed the keystone into the altar. A beam of purple light shot into the sky. The ground shook. The massive stone walls of the temple groaned, shifting, rotating, opening a path into the dark belly of the pyramid. They entered. The interior was a madness of staircases and gravity. Passageways twisted upside down. Doors opened into drops of infinite darkness. It was a place designed to confuse the mind, to break the sanity of anyone trying to reach the heart. But they were not the first ones here. Blood, Sephiroth noted. He pointed to a smear of red on the mossy floor. Fresh. Turks, Zack deduced. Sang beat us here. They moved deeper. Sephiroth took the lead, but his movements were sluggish. He was fighting a war on two fronts, the physical traps of the temple and the psychological assault of the reunion. Become whole. Become the destroyer. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was shouting. Sephiroth shook, his head trying to clear the static. He saw flashes of vision, a meteor hanging in the sky, the earth cracking, the joy of silence. Sephiroth! Aerith's voice snapped him back. He was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring down into the void. He hadn't realized he had walked so close to the edge. I am fine, he lied. They reached the inner sanctum, a room covered in murals depicting the end of the world. And there, slumped against the wall, was Sang. The leader of the Turks was in bad shape. A massive slash wound crossed his chest. His suit was ruined. He was clutching his side, his breath coming in shallow gasps. General, Sang wheezed, looking up as they approached. You look terrible. You look worse, Sang, Sephiroth said. He knelt beside the Turk. Despite their differences, despite the chase, there was a professional respect between them. Who did this? A shadow, Sang coughed. One of some robed men. It moved like you. It hit like you. It took the next keystone, went deeper. Number 2, Sephiroth murmured. He knew that clone. A former soldier, strong, dangerous. Rufus, Sang grimaced in pain. He wants the materia. He thinks it's the promised land. But it's not. Is it? No, Aerith said softly, kneeling beside him. She cast a healing spell, a soft green light enveloping the Turk. It wouldn't fix everything, but it would keep him alive. It's a burden. Sang, Sephiroth said, his voice low. Why do you serve them? You know what Shinra is. Sang managed a weak smile. We are Turks, General. We don't have the luxury of morality. We just have the job. He gestured feebly down the corridor. Go, before the clone wakes it up. They left Sang there. There was no time to evacuate him. They descended into the heart of the temple. The geometry became even more hostile. The walls seemed to breathe. Finally, they reached the mural room. In the center of the room, floating above a pool of dark liquid, was the clone. Number 2. He was chanting. Meteor. Black. Death. And in front of him, the room didn't end. It just stopped. Where is the materia? Cloud asked, looking around. Is it hidden? Aerith walked to the center of the room. She looked at the walls. She touched the ancient text carved into the stone. It's not hidden, Aerith said, her voice trembling. It's everything. What? Zack asked. The temple, Aerith explained, turning to face them. The temple is the black materia. The ancients built the structure out of the magic itself. To keep it safe, they made it too big to carry. So we can't take it, Cloud said. That's good, right? No, Sephiroth said. He was leaning against a pillar, sweat pouring down his face. Someone can shrink it. The puzzles, the mechanisms. If solved correctly, the temple collapses in on itself. It compresses. It becomes the sphere. But, Aerith looked at him with wide eyes. If the temple shrinks, anyone inside it would be crushed. Silence filled the room. The cost of the black materia was a life. I'll do it, a voice piped up from behind Zack's legs. It was the toy cat. Kate Sith, the remote-controlled robot that had forced its way into their party at the Gold Saucer. Sephiroth knew it was a spy. He knew Reeve Tuesti was controlling it from Midgar, but he had allowed it, because Reeve was one of the few men in Shinra with a conscience. I'm just a stuffed animal, Kate Sith said, waddling forward. I can solve the puzzle, I can shrink it. You guys run. Reeve, Sephiroth said. The cat froze. It turned its oversized head to look at Sephiroth. You know, the cat's voice dropped, sounding less cartoonish. I know the encryption signatures of the urban planning department, Sephiroth said. Do it, but know this. If you betray us, if you hand that materia to Rufus, I won't. The voice of Reeve came through the doll, solemn and sad. I've seen the reports, General. I've seen what Hojo did. I'm on your side. Run. I'll buy you time. Let's go, Zack yelled. They turned to flee. Wait! The voice didn't come from the cat. It came from the clone. Number 2 had stopped chanting. He turned. His hood fell back. His face was a ruin, but his eyes were glowing with a terrifying, familiar light. Sephiroth, the clone spoke. But it wasn't the clone's voice. It was her voice. Jenova. Sephiroth froze. His body locked up. Come to me, the clone said. Take it. It is yours. It is your birthright. Sephiroth took a step toward the clone. Not voluntarily. His legs moved on their own. Sephiroth, no! Zack grabbed his shoulder. Sephiroth threw him off. It wasn't a shove. It was a shockwave of telekinetic force. Zack flew across the room, slamming into the stone wall. Don't touch me! Sephiroth roared. He wasn't yelling at Zack. He was yelling at his own body. He fell to his knees. He clutched his head. The pain was blinding. It felt like his skull was splitting open. The will of Jenova was overriding his nervous system. Take the black materia, summon the meteor, wound the planet. I will not, Sephiroth gasped. You are mine, the clone laughed. It was a horrible sound. You are just a puppet, a collection of cells. You have no soul. I am, Sephiroth gritted his teeth. He reached for the Masamune. I am a soldier. He didn't attack the clone. He couldn't. The connection was too strong. If he got closer, he would be possessed completely. He turned the sword around. He grabbed the blade with his bare hand. The sharp steel bit into his palm, drawing blood. The pain. The sharp, stinging reality of the cut. It was a focus point. A tether to humanity. Cloud! Sephiroth shouted. Cloud Strife, the infantryman, was standing frozen, terrified by the display of power. Sir? Take them, Sephiroth ordered. Take Zack, take Aerith, get out. But I cannot leave yet, Sephiroth screamed. If I leave, she will take the materia. I must hold the line. Kate Sith was already at the pedestal, manipulating the ancient gears. The room began to shake. Dust rained from the ceiling. The temple was collapsing. Cloud, move! Zack groaned, pulling himself up. He grabbed Aerith. He grabbed Cloud. Go! Sephiroth roared. His eyes were flashing green, then red, then green. He was fighting a mental battle that would have vaporized a lesser man. Zack looked at his friend one last time. He saw the struggle. He saw the sacrifice. We'll wait for you at the exit, Zack promised. They ran. Sephiroth was alone with the clone and the robot. The walls began to squeeze inward. The floor buckled. It is too late, the clone sneered. The temple is shrinking. We will be crushed, and I will simply reform at the crater. But you will die. Sephiroth stood up. Blood dripped from his hand. Death is better than obedience, Sephiroth said. He looked at Kate Sith. Do it. The cat pulled the final lever. The world turned white. The sensation of the temple compressing was indescribable. It was pressure, infinite pressure. Sephiroth felt his ribs groan. He felt the air leave his lungs, but he also felt the magic condense. The massive stone pyramid was folding, shrinking, becoming dense. And then, silence. Sephiroth was lying on the grass in the forest. He gasped, sucking in the cool night air. He was alive. In front of him, sitting in the crater where the temple had been, was a small black sphere. It absorbed the light. It was heavy. It was the black materia. He reached out. His hand hovered over it. "Pick it up," the voice whispered. "Call it down." His fingers trembled. He wanted it. He wanted it more than he had ever wanted anything. It felt like a missing piece of his heart. "No." He pulled his hand back. He jammed his fist into the dirt, anchoring himself. "Sephiroth!" Zack and Cloud came running from the tree line. They saw him. They saw the materia. Sephiroth didn't look up. He stayed on his hands and knees, staring at the black orb. "Do not let me touch it," Sephiroth whispered hoarsely. Zack stopped. He saw the terror in the general's posture. "Cloud," Sephiroth said. "Pick it up." "Me," Cloud squeaked. "But it's the ultimate weapon." "You're the only one," Sephiroth said. "Zack is too loyal to me. If I ordered him to give it to me, he might hesitate. Aerith is a Cetra. The magic might overwhelm her. You are a grunt, Cloud. You follow orders, and I am ordering you." Sephiroth looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, exhausted. "Pick it up. Put it away. And if I ever ask you for it, if I beg, if I threaten, if I torture you..." Sephiroth's voice broke. "You shoot me. Do you understand?" Cloud looked at the black materia. He looked at the fallen hero. He swallowed hard. "Yes, sir," Cloud said. The boy walked forward. He picked up the black materia. He didn't flinch. He wrapped it in a piece of cloth and shoved it deep into his pack. Sephiroth exhaled. The temptation was gone, hidden away. But the knowledge remained. He was not strong enough to fight her alone. "We have the key," Zack said, helping Sephiroth to his feet. "Now what?" "Now," Sephiroth said, leaning heavily on his friend. "She will be angry. She will stop calling, and she will start hunting." He looked north. "We go to the sleeping forest. We end this at the source." But deep down, Sephiroth knew the truth. The battle at the temple was a skirmish. The war for his soul was just beginning, and the black materia was now in the hands of a boy who was far more fragile than anyone realized. Destiny is often described as a tapestry. We imagine the fates weaving threads together, creating a picture that we cannot see until we step back at the end of our lives. But I believe destiny is more like a river. It flows. It has momentum. It wants to go where it has always gone, carving the same canyon deeper and deeper. To change the course of a river requires more than just a wish. It requires a dam. It requires a landslide. It requires an act of force so violent that it breaks the banks of reality itself. Tonight, in the sleeping forest, the river of history was trying to drown a girl in pink. The forgotten city lay beneath the ocean floor, protected by a shell of ancient magic. It was a place of silence. The houses were not built of brick or wood, but grown from the fossilized remains of giant shells and coral. The light here was soft, a ghostly blue luminescence that filtered down from the lake above. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. And it felt terribly, horribly wrong. Sephiroth walked through the empty streets. He was alone. Aerith had left them. While they slept at the entrance to the forest, exhausted from the journey, she had slipped away. She knew what had to be done. She knew that the only thing powerful enough to stop the black materia was the white materia. Holy, the ultimate counter magic. But she also knew that to summon it, she had to be vulnerable. She had to open her soul to the planet. And in that moment of openness, she would be defenseless. Sephiroth tracked her footsteps in the soft, mossy ground. He didn't need to track her physically. He could feel her. Her presence was a beacon of light in the Mako-saturated darkness of his mind. But there was another presence here. Kill her. Silence the prayer. The voice of Jenova was screaming. It was no longer a whisper. It was a physical pain, a migraine that felt like a nail being driven into his left eye. The closer he got to Aerith, the louder the command became. His cells were vibrating. His muscles twitched, fighting his own nervous system. He stumbled, catching himself against a pillar of white coral. He gasped, sweat dripping from his nose onto the pale stone. "Get out!" Sephiroth hissed through clenched teeth. "Get out of my head!" "You are mine," the voice laughed. It sounded like Hojo. It sounded like the clone. It sounded like himself. "You exist to destroy. Fulfill your purpose. She is the obstacle. Remove the obstacle." Sephiroth forced himself upright. He drew the Masamune. The weight of the sword felt immense, as if gravity had doubled. He ran. He reached the center of the city. A massive structure that looked like a spiraling shell descended into the depths. At the bottom, surrounded by water, was a platform, an altar. And there she was. Aerith knelt at the edge of the water. Her hands were clasped. Her eyes were closed. The white materia, usually hidden in her hair ribbon, was glowing pale green, resting on the altar before her. She was praying. "Planet." Her voice drifted up the shaft, soft but clear. "Please, hear me. The wound is coming. We need your light." Sephiroth stood at the top of the stairs. He looked down at her. She looked so small, so fragile. "Do it!" The command hit him like a physical blow. His hand spasmed. The sword raised itself. His legs tensed, preparing to leap. The trajectory was calculated instantly by his enhanced brain. The angle of descent, the velocity, the impact point. Right through the spine. Instant death. "No," Sephiroth groaned. He grabbed his sword arm with his left hand, digging his fingers into the bicep, trying to tear the muscle to stop it from moving. "She is the enemy of the reunion. Kill her." Sephiroth took a step, not down the stairs. He stepped off the ledge. He fell. Gravity took him. He plummeted 60 feet toward the altar. Aerith heard the wind. She opened her eyes. She looked up. She saw the silver demon falling toward her, the long blade gleaming in the bioluminescence. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She looked at him with sad, accepting eyes. She thought this was the end. She thought the monster had won. But Sephiroth did not strike. In midair, he twisted his body. He wasn't aiming for her. He was aiming for the space behind her. He slammed into the ground with a cratering impact, shattering the stone tiles of the altar. Water splashed up in a massive wave, drenching Aerith. He landed in a crouch, his back to her. The Masamune held out in a defensive guard. Aerith gasped, wiping the water from her face. She looked at the back of his black leather coat. He was shaking. He was shaking so hard his pauldrons rattled. "Sephiroth?" she whispered. "Don't stop," Sephiroth choked out. His voice was a ruin. "Pray. Finish it." "But something is coming!" Sephiroth roared. The water around the altar began to boil. It wasn't heat. It was energy. Dark, corrupt energy. From the ceiling of the shell house where Sephiroth had just jumped from, a shadow detached itself. It hadn't been a shadow. It was a biomass, a piece of the calamity that had followed them. Jenova life. It dropped. It didn't land gracefully. It hit the water with a wet, meaty slap. It rose up, a towering nightmare of pink flesh, mechanical tubes, and long, whipping tentacles. It had no face, only a mask of tragedy. It screeched. The sound was not of this world. It was the sound of a dying star. Traitor. Traitor, my son, is a traitor. The monster lunged. A tentacle thick as a tree trunk whipped toward Aerith. Sephiroth moved. He didn't think. He didn't calculate. He simply acted. He stepped into the path of the strike. Crack. The tentacle slammed into Sephiroth. He blocked it with the Masamune, but the force was immense. He was driven back, his boots carving grooves into the stone. He slid until his heel touched Aerith's knee. "Pray!" Sephiroth shouted over his shoulder. Blood trickled from his nose. The proximity to the main body of Jenova was tearing his mind apart. The static was a deafening scream. Aerith closed her eyes. She clasped her hands again. She focused. She ignored the monster. She ignored the sound of steel hitting flesh. She poured her will into the white materia. Jenova shrieked again. She raised 2 claws, dripping with venom, and brought them down in a scissor motion, aiming to cut Sephiroth in half. Sephiroth parried, a blur of silver light. Clang, clang. He was faster. He was stronger. He was the perfect soldier. But he was fighting his own source code. Every time he swung the sword at her, his body resisted. His brain sent signals to stop. "Do not hurt, mother." Sephiroth gritted his teeth, forcing the blade forward. "I am not your son," he slashed. A horizontal cut. The Masamune bit into the creature's torso. It didn't bleed red. It bled black sludge. Jenova recoiled, thrashing. She fired a beam of blue light and aqualung laser. Sephiroth couldn't dodge. If he dodged, Aerith would die. He stood his ground. He cast Reflect on himself, raising a shimmering barrier of magic. The laser hit the shield. The impact was blinding. The heat was intense. The shield shattered, but the beam deflected, carving a hole in the ceiling. Sephiroth dropped to one knee. He was exhausted. "Is it done?" he gasped. "Almost," Aerith whispered. The white materia was glowing brighter now. A pillar of holy light was beginning to rise from the altar. Jenova sensed the threat. The holy magic was poison to her. She abandoned the physical attack. She switched to the psychic. Suddenly, the world fell away for Sephiroth. He wasn't in the Forgotten City. He was in the Nibelheim reactor. He was standing in front of the tank. "Open the door," Jenova whispered. "Let me out. We will sail the cosmos together. We will eat this world and find another." "You are lonely, Sephiroth. You have always been lonely. Only I can love you." It was tempting. It was so incredibly tempting to stop fighting, to just float in the warm embrace of the reunion, to belong. "Sephiroth," a voice cut through the illusion. Not Jenova, not Aerith. "Hey, get away from her, you ugly freak!" Zack. Sephiroth blinked. The reactor vanished. He was back on the altar. Zack Fair came flying down the stairs, leaping over the water. He didn't land on the altar. He landed on the creature's back. He drove the Buster Sword into the fleshy mass of Jenova's shoulder. "Cloud, cover fire!" Zack yelled. From the doorway, Cloud opened fire with his rifle. Bullets peppered the monster's eyes, blinding it. Jenova thrashed, throwing Zack off. He landed in the water, sputtering but laughing. "That's it. Look at me. Ignore the magic, lady." The distraction was enough. The pillar of light behind Sephiroth erupted. Aerith opened her eyes. They were glowing pure white. "Holy," she whispered. The white materia pulsed. A shockwave of pure, cleansing energy exploded outward. It hit Jenova. The monster screamed a sound of pure agony. The holy light burned its flesh, dissolving the corruption. It couldn't exist in the presence of such purity. Jenova life dissolved. It melted into a puddle of black ooze that evaporated into mist. The battle was over. The silence returned instantly. The water settled. Sephiroth stood up. He sheathed the Masamune. His hands were numb, his head was pounding, but the voice was quiet. For the first time in weeks, the static was gone. He turned to Aerith. She was still kneeling, looking at the white materia. The glow had faded. The marble was clear again. She looked up at him. She was smiling, but tears were running down her face. "You stayed," she said. "I stayed," Sephiroth affirmed. He reached out a hand. Aerith took it. He pulled her to her feet. She was shaking, drained of mana. She stumbled against him, and for a moment, the great general held the flower girl, supporting her weight. Zack waded out of the water, shaking his wet hair like a dog. "Okay, that was intense. Everyone in one piece?" "We are alive," Sephiroth said. He looked at his hands. He looked at Aerith. In another life, she would be dead. Her body would be sinking into the water right now. The white materia would be lost. The world would be doomed to a slow, inevitable darkness. But here, she was warm. She was breathing. "Holy is summoned," Aerith said, wiping her eyes. "It's answering, but it can't move." "Why not?" Cloud asked, walking down the stairs, eyeing the spot where the monster had been. "Something is holding it back," Aerith said, frowning. "At the north, the main body, the crater. It's blocking the magic." Sephiroth looked north. He felt the emptiness where the voice used to be. He had severed the connection, but the source remained. "Then we go to the north," Sephiroth said. His voice was different now. It was no longer the voice of a man running from his past. It was the voice of a man marching toward his future. "We go to the crater. We remove the blockage." "You mean we kill the rest of it?" Zack clarified, squeezing the water out of his gloves. "Yes," Sephiroth said. "We finished the job." He looked at Aerith. "You do not need to come," he told her. "You have done your part. You're safe now." Aerith shook her head. She picked up her staff. "No, the planet is screaming, Sephiroth. I'm coming. Besides..." She poked him in the chest, right on the leather strap of his coat. "Someone has to keep the voices out of your head." Sephiroth looked at her. A strange expression crossed his face. It was almost gratitude. "Very well," he said. He turned to the exit of the city. "Let us go," Sephiroth commanded. "The reunion is canceled." They walked out of the forgotten city. Behind them, the water of the altar remained still, undisturbed by death. The tragedy had been averted, but the river of destiny had not just been dammed, it had been redirected. And now, it was flowing straight toward the northern crater, carrying a storm with it. The compass always points north. We trust it. We follow the needle because we believe it is guiding us to a fixed point, a true direction. But what if the needle isn't pointing to a place? What if it is pointing to a wound? The magnetic pull of the north is not a law of nature. It is a memory of impact. It is the planet remembering where it was hit. It is the earth flinching around a bullet that never left the flesh. Sephiroth stood at the rim of the northern crater. Below him, the clouds swirled in a violent, unnatural vortex. It wasn't just wind, it was energy. Green streams of Mako were bleeding out of the crust, rising up to mix with the freezing gales. And threaded through the green was a dark, pulsating purple. The infection. The wind here howled with the voices of the damned. It screamed through the jagged rocks, carrying the sound of glass shattering. "It's deep," Cloud shouted over the roar of the wind. He was shivering, his breath pluming in white clouds before his face. He pulled his scarf tighter. "We have to go down there?" "All the way," Zack said, checking the straps on his armor. He stepped up beside Sephiroth. "You okay, partner? You've been staring into the abyss for 10 minutes. Sephiroth blinked. The frost had already begun to accumulate on his eyelashes. "She knows I am here," Sephiroth said. His voice was calm, but it was the calm of a man walking to the gallows. "The silence is gone. She is singing." "Singing?" Aerith asked, clutching her staff. She looked pale. The sheer volume of dying spiritual energy in this place was making her nauseous. "Not words," Sephiroth clarified. "A frequency. It is inviting." He adjusted his grip on the Masamune. "Stay close," Sephiroth commanded. "The path down is unstable. The gravity is distorted by the Mako concentration. If you fall, you will not hit the ground. You will fall into the life stream, and you will dissolve." They began the descent. The interior of the crater was a landscape of frozen violence. Huge shards of rock floated in the air, suspended by the magnetic currents. Bridges made of crystallized energy spanned the gaps. They walked in silence. The only sound was the crunch of their boots on the ice and the distant rhythmic thumping of the planet's heart arrhythmic, panicked, dying. As they went deeper, the illusions began. Cloud stopped. He stared at a wall of ice. "Mom," he whispered. He reached out. "Do not look," Sephiroth ordered sharply. He grabbed Cloud's shoulder and spun him around. "It is a defense mechanism. She reads your memories. She shows you what you have lost to make you stay." Zack kept his eyes on the path, refusing to look at the shadows that danced in his peripheral vision, shadows that looked like Angeal, shadows that looked like a burning reactor. They reached the bottom. The core of the crater was a vast, hollow chamber. The walls were made of raw materia, glowing with a pulsating light. And at the center, hovering above a lake of pure liquid, Mako, was the cocoon. It was massive. A sphere of hardened biomass, veins pulsing across its surface. Jenova, the main body. Sephiroth walked out onto the rock bridge that led to the cocoon. He stopped 20 yards away. The singing in his head stopped. The world went quiet. The cocoon cracked. It didn't explode. It peeled open like a flower blooming in hell. From the center, a figure descended. It wasn't the monster they had fought in the city. It wasn't the chaotic beast. It was a woman. She was beautiful. She had silver hair that floated in the anti-gravity. She had eyes that held the light of 1,000 dead stars. She looked almost exactly like Sephiroth. "My son," she spoke. Her voice wasn't audio. It resonated directly in their skulls. It was warm, maternal. It promised safety. "You have come home," Jenova said. She drifted closer, her feet not touching the ground. "You're tired. I can feel it. You have carried the weight of this shell for so long. The pain of individuality, the loneliness of being one." She opened her arms. "Put it down, Sephiroth. Put down the sword. Put down the ego. Come back to me. We will be whole. We will be everything." Sephiroth stood motionless. His head was bowed. His hair hid his face. "Sephiroth, don't listen to her," Zack yelled, drawing the Buster Sword. "It's a trick. She's a parasite." Jenova turned her gaze to Zack. She smiled. "Quiet little human. You do not understand the burden of a god. You cannot comprehend the peace of the reunion." She looked back at Sephiroth. "They fear you," she whispered to him. "They look at you and they see a monster. Even your friends. Deep down, they are terrified. But I am not afraid. I am you. You are me." Sephiroth's shoulders shook. "Yes," Sephiroth whispered. Jenova's smile widened. "Yes, come." Sephiroth looked up. His eyes were not the eyes of a child coming home. They were the eyes of a judge passing a death sentence. "You are me," Sephiroth agreed. "That is why I must kill you." The smile on the woman's face faltered. "I am not a god," Sephiroth said, his voice rising, echoing off the crater walls. "I am a man. I was born in a lab, raised in a cage, and lied to by everyone I ever trusted. But my pain, my loneliness, it is mine." He raised the Masamune. The blade pointed directly at her heart. "I will not trade my suffering for your silence," Sephiroth declared. "My pain makes me real." Jenova's face twisted. The beauty melted away. The skin cracked. The silver hair turned into writhing tentacles. The maternal warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, alien hunger. "Then you will die alone," she shrieked. The woman exploded. Flesh tore apart. Bone expanded. The entity grew, filling the cavern. It became the synthesis, a towering horror of biological weapons, lasers, claws, wings made of raw energy. It was a creature designed to conquer galaxies. "Zack! Cloud! Left flank!" Sephiroth barked, sliding into a combat stance. "Aerith! Shield us!" The battle for the planet began. It was a storm of violence. Jenova unleashed a barrage of Ultima magic. Explosions of blue fire rocked the platform. Aerith raised her staff. "Great gospel!" A golden rain fell over the party, healing their wounds, shielding them from the worst of the magic. Sephiroth moved like a lightning bolt. He was a blur of silver and black. He jumped, soaring through the air, slashing at the massive tentacles. Slice, slice, slice. He was cutting away his own heritage. Every strike was a rejection of his biology. Jenova screamed. She swiped a massive claw at Cloud. Cloud rolled, bringing his rifle up. He fired a steady stream of bullets into the creature's eyes. "Eat lead, you ugly mother!" The creature roared, turning its attention to the boy. It charged a beam of energy. "Cloud, move!" Zack tackled Cloud, throwing them both behind a rock just as the beam vaporized the spot where they had been standing. Sephiroth saw them fall. "No more," Sephiroth growled. He landed on the central platform. He looked at the massive, pulsing core of the monster, the heart. He closed his eyes. He focused. He didn't reach for the reunion. He reached for the planet. He reached for the technique that he had never used, because it required a connection to the earth that he thought he didn't have. He felt the life stream beneath him. He felt the spirits of the Citra. He felt the innkeeper. He felt the clone he had killed on the bridge. They weren't screaming at him. They were lending him their strength. Sephiroth opened his eyes. They glowed with a pure green light. "Supernova," he whispered. But it wasn't the illusion of a destroying sun. It was the focused, burning light of a star born to protect. He swung the sword. A wave of energy erupted from the blade. It wasn't fire. It was pure force. It cut through the air, creating a vacuum. It hit the core of Jenova. The monster froze. The energy wave passed through it. For a second, nothing happened. Then a line of light appeared down the center of the creature. Jenova synthesis split in half. The two halves fell apart, dissolving into black smoke before they even hit the ground. The scream that followed was not audible. It was a psychic death rattle that shook the entire continent. The smoke swirled, trying to reform, trying to find a host. It rushed towards Sephiroth. "Sephiroth!" Aerith screamed. Sephiroth didn't move. He stood there, arms open, inviting the smoke. "Come," he said. The black mist slammed into him. It poured into his nose, his mouth, his pores. Sephiroth fell to his knees. He convulsed. His skin turned gray. His veins bulged, turning black. "Has absorbing it!" Zack scrambled to his feet. "Has taking it back in!" "No," Aerith said, watching closely. "He's not absorbing it. He's trapping it." Sephiroth let out a roar of agony. He was fighting the cells inside his own bloodstream. He was using his own body as a prison. He was gathering every scrap of Jenova's consciousness, every piece of the alien code, and he was locking it down. He slammed his fist into the ice. "I reject you." A pulse of green energy exploded from his body. It was the life stream responding to his will. It flushed his system. It pushed the darkness out, not into the air, but into the raw Mako below. The black smoke was ejected from his body, forced down into the lake of energy. The life stream swarmed it. The spirits of the planet attacked the alien invader, tearing it apart at the molecular level. Jenova was gone. Not just dead, erased. Sephiroth slumped forward. He was breathing hard. He looked human. He looked mortal. The silence that followed was heavy. The wind had stopped howling. The purple light was gone. The crater was just a quiet, cold place full of green light. Zack walked up to him slowly. He reached out and touched Sephiroth's shoulder. "Hey," Zack whispered. "You still with us, General?" Sephiroth lifted his head. He looked at his hands. They were pale, trembling, but they were his. "I am Sephiroth," he said hoarsely. "I am just Sephiroth." Cloud let out a whoop of joy. "We did it! We actually did it!" Aerith didn't cheer. She walked to the edge of the platform and looked down into the glowing green liquid. "The blockage is gone," she said. "Holy is moving." A rumble shook the crater. "We need to leave," Sephiroth said, struggling to stand. Zack grabbed his arm and hauled him up. "The barrier is falling. The energy is going to release." "The high wind," Zack pointed up. Descending through the clouds was the massive airship. Sid Highwind had come for them. They ran. They scrambled up the rope ladders as the ground beneath them began to crack and glow white. As the airship pulled away, soaring up out of the north cave, they looked down. The crater was glowing. A pillar of white light holy was rising from the center of the earth. It wasn't a weapon. It was a shield. It spread out, covering the planet, healing the scars, pushing back the darkness. Sephiroth sat on the deck of the Highwind. The wind whipped his hair. He watched the light. He had won. He had defeated his destiny. He had saved the world. But as he looked at the white light, he felt a profound emptiness. The voice was gone. The connection was gone. He was finally, truly, completely alone. And he realized that he didn't know how to live in a world where he didn't have a monster to fight. Peace is a difficult thing to navigate for a man who was built for war. We imagine peace as a celebration, fireworks, parades, the embracing of loved ones in the streets. And yes, for the people of the world, That is exactly what it was. But for the soldier, peace is a sudden, jarring silence. It is the moment the engine stops and you are left with nothing but the ringing in your ears. It is the realization that the thing you are best at is no longer required. The high wind drifted through the clouds. The engines hummed a low, steady rhythm, vibrating through the deck plates. Below them, the world was healing. Sephiroth stood on the observation deck, looking down. The northern crater was fading behind them, a scar on the ice that was slowly being covered by the shifting snows. The holy magic had dispersed, settling into the life stream like a soothing balm. The angry green glow of the Mako reactors in the cities they passed seemed dimmer, less aggressive, as if the planet itself had taken a deep breath. "You're brooding again." Sephiroth didn't turn. He knew the footfalls, heavy boots, but a light step. "I am thinking," Sephiroth corrected. Zack leaned against the railing beside him. He looked tired. His black hair was matted with sweat and ice, his armor dented from the battle with the synthesis. But his eyes were bright. They were alive in a way they hadn't been since Nibelheim. "Thinking about what?" Zack asked. "What kind of pizza we're gonna order when we get back to Midgar? I'm voting for the Sector 6 special, extra cheese." Sephiroth looked at his friend. He saw the future in Zack's face. He saw a man who could lead, a man who could change Shinra from the inside, who could turn the company from a vampire into a guardian. "I am not going back to Midgar," Sephiroth said. The wind whistled through the railing. Zack's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" Zack asked, a nervous chuckle escaping his lips. "Of course we're going back. We have to file the report. We have to tell Lazard that Hojo is toast. We have to, I don't know, get medals? You love medals." "I have never cared for medals," Sephiroth said softly. "They are just pieces of metal given to men for surviving things they shouldn't have." He turned to face Zack fully. The silver hair whipped across his face. "I cannot return, Zack. Think about it. I am the product of Project S. I am the son of the Calamity. Hojo is dead, but his data remains. The board, Rufus. They will look at me and they will not see a hero. They will see a weapon. They will see a biological risk." "Screw them," Zack snapped, slamming his hand on the rail. "Let them try something. Me and Cloud, we'll bust you out. We did it before, we'll do it again." "And then what?" Sephiroth asked gently. "We live as fugitives forever? We drag Aerith and Cloud into a lifetime of running? No." He looked at his hands. The hands that had killed Hojo. The hands that had almost killed Aerith. "I have Jenova's cells," Sephiroth whispered. "I have silenced her voice, yes. I have locked her away in the deepest dungeons of my mind. But she is there, Zack. She will always be there. If I return to civilization, if I am surrounded by Mako, if I weaken, I could become a danger to everyone I protect." Zack opened his mouth to argue, but the words died in his throat. He looked at Sephiroth, really looked at him, and saw the exhaustion. It wasn't physical. It was the exhaustion of a man holding back a tidal wave with nothing but his will. "So where will you go?" Zack asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Nibelheim," Sephiroth said. "The manor is empty. The basement contains the truth. I will guard it. I will ensure that no one ever tries to repeat Hojo's mistake." That's a lonely life, General," Zack whispered. "I am used to loneliness," Sephiroth smiled. It was a genuine smile, a sad, small thing, but real. Besides, I will have the silence. The door to the bridge opened. Aerith and Cloud stepped out. They sensed the mood instantly. Aerith walked over, her pink dress fluttering in the wind. She stopped in front of Sephiroth. She didn't say anything. She simply reached out and took his hand. She didn't check his pulse. She just held it. "You're leaving," she stated. It wasn't a question. The Cetra always knew. "It is for the best," Sephiroth said. "You know," Aerith said, looking up at him with those deep, ancient green eyes. "The planet doesn't hate you. It mourns for you. It knows you didn't ask to be made this way." "That is enough for me," Sephiroth said. He looked at Cloud. The boy was standing awkwardly by the door, holding the Buster sword Zack had let him carry it for a moment, and he looked like he was holding a holy relic. "Cloud," Sephiroth said. Cloud snapped to attention. "Sir!" "You did well," Sephiroth said. "You are strong, stronger than you know. Do not let anyone tell you that you are just a grunt. You carried the weight of the world in your pack." Cloud blushed, stammering. Thank you, sir." Sephiroth turned back to Zack. This was the hardest part. The puppy, the friend, the only man who had ever treated him like a human being. "Zack," Sephiroth said. He reached out and placed a hand on Zack's shoulder. "Take care of them. Change the world. Be the hero that I could not be." Zack had tears running down his face. He didn't wipe them away. He grabbed Sephiroth's hand and gripped it tight. "You are a hero," Zack choked out. "You saved us. You saved me." "Goodbye, Zack." The high wind began its descent over the mountains of Nibel. The village was quiet below. The mansion loomed on the hill, dark and foreboding. Sephiroth didn't wait for the ship to land. He stepped onto the railing. "Wait!" Zack yelled. Sephiroth looked back one last time. He etched their faces into his memory. The flower girl, the infantryman, the soldier, his family. "Live," Sephiroth commanded. And then he jumped. He fell through the clouds, a silver streak against the blue sky. He didn't crash. He landed on the roof of the Shinra Manor with the grace of a cat. He watched the high wind bank and turn, heading east toward Midgar. He watched until it was just a speck in the distance, until it was gone. Sephiroth turned and walked into the mansion. He walked through the dusty halls. He walked down the spiral staircase. He entered the basement. The scorch marks from where he had burned the reports were still on the floor. The smell of ash was faint, mixing with the mildew. He walked to the back of the library. He found a chair. He sat down. He placed the Masamune across his lap. He closed his eyes. He listened. He expected to hear the voice. He expected the static of Jenova to creep back in now that he was alone. But there was nothing. Just the sound of the house settling, the sound of the wind outside, the sound of his own heartbeat. He was the guardian of the dark secrets. He was the warden of his own biology. He was the ghost of Nibelheim. Years would pass. Legends would grow. People would tell stories of the silver angel who lived in the mountains. Travelers who got lost in the Nibel passes would sometimes report seeing a tall figure in a black coat, watching them from the ridges, guiding them back to the path without ever saying a word. Shinra would change. Under the leadership of Lazard and the influence of a legendary hero named Zack Fair, the company would slowly shift away from Mako. They would invest in wind, in solar. The reactors would shut down one by one. Aerith would tend her flowers in the church, and sometimes she would look west and smile, sending a prayer on the wind. Cloud would finally make Soldier First Class, not because of experiments, but because of hard work. And in the dark basement of a forgotten mansion, a man sat in the silence. He was not mad. He was not a god. He was simply Sephiroth. And for the first time in his life, he was free. History is written by the victors, they say. But the best histories are the ones that are never written down at all. They are the quiet victories, the tragedies that were averted because someone chose to listen to a friend instead of a ghost. This has been the story of a world where the wing never turned black. A world where the reunion was not a collision, but a goodbye. I am the Midnight Materia writer. Thank you for listening to the archives. Sleep well, travelers. And remember, even in the deepest darkness, you always have a choice.